Good afternoon. Welcome to the April 1st work session for the Board of Education, and also Ms. Carter's birthday. So we're going to wish her happy birthday.
You can leave the presents on the table outside the door.
I welcome you all here today. I did see that there was one elected official here. Is that Mitch Lancaster? I'm sorry to call you out. Southern Pines. Was there anybody else here that I see? Welcome to our work session. For those of you who haven't been to our work session before, this is really an opportunity for the Board of Education to look deeply into some topics that we are considering. So there's no public comment today, but there will be next Monday at our regular business meeting. But thank you for being here and being interested in the topics of today. It's a long agenda. With that, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried 7-0. Dr. Brown. Pledge of
Stand
allegiance.
for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Grimacy, reports, information, and discussion.
Yes, ma'am. I'll begin by inviting Mr. Tim Locklear. And while he gets himself comfortable, I will note that as a member of his dissertation committee, I don't think I'm out of order in recognizing that he successfully defended his dissertation on Saturday. And since I am on a dissertation committee, I won't declare him Dr. Locklear yet, but I will say that he's on his way. Seated with him is soon-to-be Dr. Bridget Johnson, who I was not on her dissertation committee, but she's on her way. And I believe soon-to-be Dr. Kim Bullard is in the back. Leave any of the other recent doctors out. It's been a good spring, a cohort that went through 3 years together. So we'll recognize them again in the future. But Mr. Soon-to-be Dr. Locklear, you're on.
Thank you, sir. And certainly appreciate all the support we've gotten through that. Madam Chair, board members, soon-to-be Dr. Johnson and I are here today to share an update and an overview with you, and we appreciate the opportunity to do that around what we are doing from the district level to support academic achievement and continuous improvement. There has been, certainly as we've delved into setting the context for the student assignment process, there's been some public narrative and some public question of what are we doing as a district to support overall achievement in all of our schools, and specifically at our schools that have some challenges in supporting academic achievement. And we appreciate that question, and we appreciate the opportunity by the board to come and share an overview and an update of the work that we're doing from the district level. That's driven by the Moore County Schools Strategic Plan that you developed last year in collaboration with the community stakeholders. That strategic plan really driven around how do we engage our students, how do we inspire them to be successful, around 5 domains. And while we're going to concentrate on the academic achievement domain, which is the first domain, we know that all 5 of those domains are woven together to support academic achievement. The second domain of supporting student health, welfare, and safety. Third domain of building employee culture and capacity. The fourth domain of engaging with our parent community. And that 5th domain of organizational capacity and efficiency. Those all tie together to support student achievement. And while we're going to focus on student achievement, it's important that we recognize that as well. And when we think about that strategic plan and how it's driven our work, it's important that we take a look at our vision and our mission. And our vision for Moore County Schools is that we will ensure educational experiences that inspire students to reach their full potential, lead productive lives in an ever-changing world. And our mission is grounded in creating supportive, engaging, and safe learning environments that build knowledge, skills, and abilities needed for future success in that ever-changing world. And Bridget and I are going to share some overviews of some of the big picture work that we've done from the district level around some areas that we've really concentrated on to support academic achievement. but we also want to share some highlights of specific targeted work that we've done with our schools that are challenged, how we've supported them at higher levels, and then also how we've utilized some targeted resources to support those schools. Some of the work that we really concentrated on in over the last really 3 years is looking at how do we support research-based, impactful instructional strategies in our district. How do we build a framework from that, from the bottom up, from our teaching staff on up, to support academic achievement in our schools? And that strategic research-based being linked to supporting the skill sets of the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And within that, how do we create professional learning opportunities for our teachers that are differentiated and that meet them where they are so we can continue to grow our teaching staff? We've also looked at how do we identify and support our schools, looking at their areas of greatest need and attacking those areas of greatest need specific to each individual school that's driven by our strategic plan. And under Dr. Johnson's leadership and others, we've really looked at over the last 3 years of refining our school improvement processes that our schools use with their teams of teachers and staff, of what are the areas we need to improve upon and how do we create improvement strategies to do that. And so we've really looked at strengthening and refining our systems and processes around that work. Intertwined in that is how do we support and identify in Moore County what do professional learning communities look like in Moore County? Because that work, that collaborative work at the school level, that's all a professional learning community is a team. It's a team at the school level that's co-laboring together to address the challenges that are in that school or in that grade level or on that teacher team. And so how do we support that work as a district? And that's something we spend a lot of time with, is working, identifying how do we go about answering 4 critical questions. That's what we want those teams to answer. One is, what do we want the students to learn? The second is, how are you going to know they learned it? The third is, what do you do if they didn't learn it? And the fourth is, what do you do if they already learned it? How do you expand and enrich their learning? And so that's the work we've gone about working from the district level of creating those frameworks and supports to drive that work forward in our schools, to drive continuous improvement and academic achievement. One of those areas we want to go a little deeper in and sharing an update and overview with you is in the work we've done around the instructional frameworks. And I'm going to ask Bridget if she would dive deeper in that, but she's led some great work with our teachers and our curriculum and instruction team around building a K-5 literacy framework, a K-5 math framework, and an overall 6-12 instructional framework. And I'd like to ask her to go a little deeper in that and also share some more information about our school improvement processes. Bridget?
So, as you're aware, last fall, in 18-19, we actually took the time to take a group of 30 teachers together, 30 teachers, administrators, and some Ed Center folks to build the first framework, and that was the K-5 literacy framework. That K-5 literacy framework, you may or may not have seen this graphic before, but it was built on those 4 pillars around the outside of responding to student need, being data-driven, being research-based in our practices, and being standards-aligned. So taking those 4 ideas that are ongoing, the 6 circles on the inside, really illustrate the 6 things that we expect to see in all of our K-5 literacy classrooms. So we built that actually in the 17-18 school year and did professional development on it all last year. And then coming into this school year, decided that it was time that we really say, you know, what is it we expect to see in K-5 math? And at the same time, what is it we expect to see in 6-12 instruction? And so 2 more frameworks were built. The K-5 math framework, which you see here. Again, the ideas on the outside are the things that are ongoing that we would see in any K-5 math classroom. So similar ideas around the outside of being student-centered, data-driven, best practices, and standards-based. And then more on the inside are things that we also would expect to be ongoing in a math classroom. So clear learning targets with formative assessment, reflection and closure is occurring, as well as math talks. Those inside circles we expect to see every day in K-5 classrooms. So whole group mini lessons, teacher-led small group instruction, and then independent purposeful practice that's standards-based. So really just working on being clear about what we know research says is best for instruction in K-5 classrooms, but it was our teachers, and I want to reiterate that, it was our teachers who developed these frameworks. We guided them through a process to do that, but it was the teachers that said, this is what should be in every K-5 classroom for literacy and math. We did the same this past fall with 6 through 12. We brought together 2 representatives from each, and then some administrators and some curriculum and instruction folks, and some folks from EC. Brought them together to really outline what is it that our 6 through 12 instructional framework should have. There are 3 main components of that framework. So a solid classroom culture and environment, we believe, is the start of any great classroom, that you have to have that. Data-informed instruction to drive those instructional strategies, which is what's at the bottom of that framework. This is the graphic of the framework that makes it so we can see the big components, but when we click ahead, we see that each of those components has subcomponents. So for instance, there are 9 instructional strategies that the teachers identified as being the research-based practices that we believe we would want to see in 6 through 12 classrooms. There are 3 subcategories in both the classroom culture and environment and the data-informed instruction. So we've worked with our teachers and our principals. They've rolled this out to their staffs on the March 11th Professional Development Day. That day was dedicated to K-5 math and to the 6 through 12 instructional framework. We also are in the process of building websites that the teachers can use as resources. So Catherine, if you don't mind clicking on that link that's linked in there to the 6 through 12 instructional framework website. The website, once we get in, it has those 3 components that I just outlined, and once you click into those, it gives you definitions of each of the different areas. So for instance, if you'll scroll down and click on instructional strategies, that yellow circle. So each of those 9 areas that we said was an instructional strategy, then there's a resource page for each of those that has resources, videos, things that teachers can use to really get a clear understanding of what those mean. And then Catherine, if you'll scroll back up to the top right corner where it says PLC Planning. So we also want to make the connection, as Tim said, we're not only working on the instruction, but we're also working on strengthening our PLCs. And so we want our teaching staff to see that it is the PLC, the professional learning community, that is using these instructional frameworks to drive our instruction. So these are resources that we have used with our principals, that our principals have then turned around and used with their staff. So there's a screencast there on how to identify power standards. There's different rubrics from Solution Tree, which is the leading company that does PLC work. There's just different resources, and we're trying to make that connection for our teachers that strong PLCs is going to impact and make strong instruction. So these are not 2 separate ideas, but instead they work collaboratively together. Go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so that's the instructional framework. Alongside that, as Tim mentioned, another big area that we've put a lot of emphasis on has been our school improvement process. Over the course of the last 3 years, we have worked to strengthen that school improvement process, and the first step in that process was to create a comprehensive needs assessment. We had a comprehensive needs assessment before, but to strengthen that process of using our school improvement teams to really delve deep into the data and really look at what is it that each particular school needs according to their comprehensive needs assessment, and then build school improvement plans that address those most significant needs that come. So we gave the schools protocols to use in order to, we didn't just say, dig deeper in your data. We gave them protocols to use to really help them walk through that process of what would that look like. And then we also have put in some fidelity checks. So we call those process checks, and we have 1 or 2 directors that come out to the school site. We did process checks in the fall, and we're in the process again this spring, where a director or 2 will go out to the school site, meet with the school improvement team, and we actually walk through their school improvement plan, and we have a protocol in place to help the team really talk through how are we doing on our school improvement plan? What areas have we really put a lot of emphasis on and we can celebrate? And what areas may we need to either look at again or rework or put some more energy towards? Those process checks have been very well received by the school improvement teams and by the principals. And it has helped us as a district staff as well to know where we could support schools further. So that happened in the fall. We ran through all 23 schools, and we are in the process of doing that right now, those process checks. The other thing that we have changed is that we have a clear 2-year plan as far as school improvement planning goes. So the principals know where in the process they should be with their school improvement plan. And we also have changed, as you know, when schools will come before you to have their plans endorsed. And so instead of having all the schools renew every other year, we've put them on an every other year cycle to keep that school improvement process alive and to keep it in the forefront of all of our minds.
And Bridget,
Yes,
with going out and looking at the plan with the directors and the ones that are just checking, are they finding that that overall the school is on target with where they need to be with their performance plans?
Yes, they really have been. It has helped us see, like I said, where we've put a lot of energy and where we may need to put a little bit more energy. But yes, we have found that we are following those plans. We've created them and been very specific about what goes into them. We've been working on writing really well-written goals that really address the comprehensive needs assessment. And so I do feel like they're saying what, they're doing what they said they would do in those plans. It's been a great success. Okay. So the next step is our tiered support plans, which when we look at the school improvement process, we sometimes find that some schools need more support than other schools. And so with that, Tim and I have worked together to create a plan for that as well.
And these tiered support plans are designed for our schools that are somewhat challenged in getting the academic proficiency that we want to see in all our schools. So Bridget, in collaboration with principals, schools that are included here are Aberdeen Elementary, Southern Middle, Robbins Elementary, have been able to collaborate with Bridget and develop a tiered support plan of additional support in those schools in order to support increased academic achievement. That is tied directly to that school improvement plan that school has developed and has targeted those areas of greatest need. And so that's, I think, been a powerful tool for us this year. And Bridget has worked with them, with her curriculum and instruction team, to go in and offer support at a higher level.
Sure. So the principal and I sat in the fall. We looked over the comprehensive needs assessment. We looked over the school improvement plan and said, now where could the curriculum and instruction team support you further? How could we help you get this plan accomplished? And so some of the things that we have done is some of our schools, we have content specialists that are in PLCs every week. They go and they are sitting in the PLC with the teachers and providing that content support, helping with the PLC process. We have other schools where all 3 of those schools, we have spots where the curriculum and instruction team are coaching and supporting teachers or teams of teachers actually in the classroom, modeling classroom lessons, modeling strategies that that the teacher may be trying out for the first time. And then we also have increased professional development opportunities for those schools. And that too can occur during that PLC time, can occur after school, and that may be one of our content specialists coming out and providing that professional development. That could be myself coming out and providing that. But we have increased support around those schools that we feel like need additional support.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you expect to see the outcomes? Where do you expect to see the outcomes of that increased support?
Well, ultimately, we would see increases in student achievement. That's the ultimate goal, but we would look at all of our data sets, and that's part of that comprehensive needs assessment. So looking at not just the student achievement data, but the attendance data and the teacher working condition data and the behavioral data, all of that data together, we would expect an increase in that comprehensive needs assessment.
Lastly, we wanted to share with you how, from an academic student support services perspective, how we also, through the guidance of strategic plan, target our resources. We have targeted allocation of our resources to support our schools that have greater level of needs. Examples of that include using federal Title I funding to schools with a 40% or higher free and reduced student populations. These are funds provided by the federal government. And we provide those at those schools, what we call a per pupil expenditure, so the number of students in that school, there's a certain formula for that. We provide federal Title I funding to our Title I schools where there's an instructional coach provided in each of those Title I schools. That's an additional staff position in those schools that is put there targeted to support instruction, support teachers in the classroom, to go in, to co-teach, to work with them through coaching cycles, and provide them various professional learning as they're supported through the curriculum and instruction team. We provide local funding to provide full-time assistant principals at Aberdeen Elementary and Aberdeen Primary, and at Southern Pines Elementary and Southern Pines Primary, where the state formula would not provide even a half-time assistant principal at those schools. So we use local funding to do that. We use federal funding to support an additional counselor at Southern Middle School, and local funding to provide an additional full-time assistant principal at Southern Middle School. Where our other large middle school has 2 assistant principals, we have 3 at Southern Middle. We also, our schools, through that Title I funding that they receive, they're able to utilize that to target those respective needs that they have in their schools. For example, some of our Title I schools fund STEM teachers as an actual additional elective or special for their students. Some fund reading intervention teachers or additional classroom teachers based on their respective needs. And lastly, as an example, we use federal funding to support best practice programs like the Caption Kids' Hearts programs that several of our Title I schools have received training, and Southern Middle School is a whole school implementation of this really very, very successful program, Caption Kids' Hearts. And so these are all examples of how we use targeted allocation of resources to support and grow our schools and have continuous improvement. And so, again, we appreciate this opportunity to share an overview, an update, a view of how the district, from the district perspective, how we're working to support academic achievement and continuous improvement. We certainly are excited about the work that our principals are doing in each of their schools with their staffs, developing those school improvement plans. You know, the state can put whatever designation they'd like to put on a school, but the true essence of a school, the true success of a school is the leadership of that principal, working with those staffs, working with their kids, working with that school community to offer an incredible learning opportunity and learning environment. We're proud of that work, and we're going to continue to do all we can to get better at what we're doing from the district level to support that work. And I know our principals of those schools certainly could express even more detail the work of their school and school communities. But again, thank you, and we're open to any questions and discussion.
I just wanted to say thank you for that framework visual. I think it's even great to even put in teachers on their wall just as a visual of, okay, this is what I need to do. And I think it would help the students too realize this is what we're doing in our classroom today. I love that. I wish I had that when I was a teacher, because it really does make you focus down on what really matters and what you really need to do. So thank you for doing all that.
Our teachers, it was hard work for,
I bet, yeah.
But they did the work. It was great.
Another piece, excuse me, is to realize that this does not happen overnight.
Correct.
The success will take 2 to 3 years at least, minimum, sometimes up to 5 years, for that to transfer into the production that we want. So people need to be aware that as much as energy has been put into this, and as good as the teachers are, and as good as the students are trying to be, success does not show automatically.
Well, and it's worth noting, as we're looking at budget issues coming up, that it is that local funding, which our commissioners are gracious in allotting us, that gives us these assistant principal positions and the and the full-time assistant principal at Southern Middle. That's local funds, that the state doesn't see that there's a need, but that our staff and our commissioners recognize the fact that there actually is a need for it and can justify that. One question, though, real quickly. I'd gone back to look at the Southern Middle School Improvement Plan. Tell me a little bit about Capturing Kids' Hearts. How does that program work, and what does it do?
Caption Kids' Hearts program is a program facilitated and training by something called Flipping Group. A guy by the name of Flip Flippin, who started this program years ago. But the Caption Kids' Heart program is really teaching our adults skill sets where they can engage students, and help bring them in the classroom and create relationships with them. And it's really about creating a classroom culture and a school culture that's inviting, that's safe, and some of our students who struggle the most many times come into the classroom with all kind of anxiety and other things that's going on in their life, and the Caption Kids Hearts skill sets that are taught help our adults learn how to deal with that, welcome those students in the classroom, and create a classroom environment that's safe and open to learning.
Is this the first year that it's been in full implementation?
The third year.
Third year. And what are you learning from implementing it at Southern Middle that can be used in other schools?
Well, we're certainly learning that it's been successful in creating a more safe, positive culture. They've seen their discipline data reduced over time as a result of that. We've also seen some positive outcomes in academics. That hasn't had the consistency we'd like to see, but we've seen some good positive outcomes with that.
And Ms. Cooper did a presentation for one of the organizations I'm involved in. And the good part, too, was the students coming back from Pinecrest, where they'd been gone to talk about what had happened to them and how they were ready for high school. So it was a very positive implementation. And the teachers are very positive about using it and feeling that it gives them a facilitation in the classroom to work with their students better.
I know last year or at the beginning of this year, and I see that Ms. Carter has these. Can I borrow one for a second? These school improvement plans, are these available on the website for each school? They are? Okay.
You can find them. You can find them actually on each individual school website. When you go to our school, there'll be a link to the current school improvement plan, or you can go back online through the county website. I found that and look them up, and you can find them for numerous years going on back, which is interesting to see which programs they decided worked well and continued with, and which ones were discarded in favor of others. Obviously, PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention Strategies, is a program that works in incredibly successful ways at multiple schools.
And I'll add that PBIS is occurring in all of our schools, even those schools that are doing Capturing Kids' Hearts. They blend together really nicely. Mm-hmm. And so we're able to kind of layer Capturing Kids' Hearts on top of that PBIS initiative.
Well, these are very interesting reading to see what the priorities happen to be and how they the faculty staff is implementing it through.
Right.
And remind me who sits on the school improvement teams. Is that staff only, or does it include
It
others?
includes parent representatives
Okay.
as well. Mm-hmm. It's parent representatives that are representative of the demographics of the school. And so typically there's
Two to three parent representatives, there's support staff members, as well as certified staff members, administrators. Those are public meetings. The dates are posted. Anyone's welcome. But that's the working committee of the school improvement team.
So within each school, you could look to see who's on their committee and then ask to attend and watch what they
Absolutely.
talk about.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It's also good to see that PLCs, the professional learning communities, are strong and continuing to go even stronger. I know, excuse me, back when I was teaching, we had these meetings, and as much as you don't want to stay after school for another meeting or come in early for another meeting, there was some incredible sharing that went on during those times, and the opportunity for teachers to develop their own skills and to find ways to cope with situations that might come up within their classrooms, and to share successful tactics. So it's good to know that those are really strong in all of our schools.
Well, I know from time to time you all share some of the resources. I know we heard from, I think it was Robbins, right, to learn about their STEM program, and that was fully funded with Title I funds. Is that correct? Yeah.
Your
and
STEM teacher is funded through that.
so it's great for us to hear those success stories. So whenever you have them, please do bring them forward to us so that we can learn about them ourselves and then share them with the public. Are there any other questions or comments? Nothing else? Okay. Dr. Grimsey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Locklear will stay put and invite whatever individuals that are going to join him for item 2B, School District Multi-Year Student Reassignment Plan, draft number 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board members, again, we appreciate the opportunity to be presenting to you this afternoon the first draft of the multi-year student assignment plan. I have with me this afternoon Laura Evans and Mike Miller of Numerax, who've been our partners and consultants in working through this work with our advisory committee and getting to this point that we are this afternoon. At your February 11th meeting, you reaffirmed your commitment to the guiding principles of what we needed to look at and staff needed to follow as we work through this process. And so this afternoon, as Mike and Laura share this first draft with you, we really appreciate your review and your feedback on how we've worked through and how we've implemented with fidelity attention to the guiding principles that you reaffirmed in February, how the desired outcomes of this multi-year student assignment plan connect to and are driven by those guiding principles, and how we've worked through the timeline and process and with fidelity have worked through the timeline and process that you endorsed in February. And with that, including the detailed work that we've done with our advisory committee on student assignments. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura and Mike, and then, of course, we'll be open to questions and discussion as we work through it.
Right. Well, it's good to be back with you. I think we met with you last on February 4th, and we want to present to you our doings since then. We've been quite busy. In addition to the doings we've been doing, we're going to present to you a first step toward a student assignment plan, draft 1, the first step. I think I'm in charge of the clicker.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So today we'll review the guiding principles. Everything that we do, every move that we consider, we look at through the lens of the guiding principles. Okay, and we'll review those with you today. We're going to talk some about the process that we use. It's no different from the process we used last year, but this is a new year. New schools are involved, new families are involved, so we want to detail the process that we go through. We want to go over our desired outcomes for the student assignment plan today. And as Dr. Tim just said, we do have a superintendent's advisory committee, and in meeting with them over 3 meetings, we've developed, or they have given us general comments as we've worked through and developed this first step, draft 1. And then we'll present to you draft 1 today and the data tables that go along with it. We'll cover the timeline, and we'll cover what's in the addendum. The addendum is additional information that is open to everyone to review, that as we go through the process, people ask for it. And so we try to put it in the addendum so everybody has the same data. All right, the guiding principles that the board, developed last year, and we used it last year for the beginnings of the McDeeds Creek Elementary School. You affirmed them again, as Tim just said, back in February. And everything we do, we look back at these 4 things. We're looking at balance. To the extent possible, we want to balance utilization. We want to balance program opportunities. We want to balance student demographics across our schools. We look at planning. We want to use the best data possible. Okay, and we're going to show you all the data that goes into our work. Okay, we want to be efficient. We want to develop an assignment proposal that focuses on operational efficiency, and that's going to come up pretty large in this year's development of a plan, in that we were looking at the whole county. Instead of last year, we just looked at area 1. And so operational efficiency is going to be big this time. And then finally, to the extent possible, we want this assignment process to be open and transparent. Mike and I are actually here for the next 3 days, because tomorrow night and Wednesday night we'll have community meetings, and we'll get feedback from the community. Then we'll come back after we've reviewed that feedback and met with the advisory committee again. We'll come back in May with another step toward the final proposal. It'll be draft 2. And then over the summer, we'll continue to get feedback. We'll have another set of parent meetings. We'll meet with the advisory committee again. At that point, staff's going to really work hard on transportation efficiencies. That takes a good bit of time, and plus the summer's kind of a slower month for everybody, so we'll use the summer to fine-tune everything, and then ultimately we're going to bring you a draft 3, okay, which at some point becomes the superintendent's recommendation for the student assignment proposal. But all through the process, staff is involved, Mike and I are involved, the assignment committee, the superintendent's advisory committee is involved, and parents are involved. And then we'll learn, tomorrow night we'll share the various ways that parents can provide feedback through this process. So the guiding principles, there's no priority among any of them. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they conflict, sometimes we can't reach that goal where we want to be. But that's just the way it happens sometimes, okay? So, but these are what we look at in everything that we do, the guiding principles. The process. We begin by geocoding every Moore County student for the last 4 years. What that means is we put them on a map based on where they live. And once we have them geocoded, then we have all this information attached to them. What grade are they in? What's their race? What's their proficiency levels? What's their gender? Anything you could possibly imagine is attached to those students. And so that's our basis for our Moore County Schools geo database. Okay? And again, it's 4 years worth of data. Anything you want to share about that, Mike? Okay. Gonna be okay. All right. Now, as I said, the superintendent appointed an advisory committee to help us through the process. And it's no little committee. It's a pretty good sized committee because we're looking at the whole county. So the membership includes district staff, us, the consultants, principal from every school, a teacher from every school, a parent from every school except for the high schools, and Pinckney Academy. And then just want to make sure everybody's clear that there's just one team that represents Aberdeen and Southern Pines because eventually there'll be K-5 schools. Okay? So there's 60-some people on this advisory committee, and when we first heard that large number, we're like, that's just a little overwhelming. But we've had 3 meetings with this group already, and staff has done an excellent job, what's the word? The protocol, facilitate and the protocol we work through so that I think everyone on the committee can tell you they feel engaged, they feel a part, they feel like they're being heard. And to tell you the truth, Mike and I feel like they're giving excellent input. Okay, so we're loving the advisory committee. We were scared about 60-some people, but we are loving the advisory committee. They are divided up into subcommittees, Area 1, Area 2, Area 3, and those subcommittees are chaired by the high school principals, which is awfully nice of them. They're not getting paid for that, but they're doing that nice job, and they're doing a really good job of that. And then that committee, we've met 3 times already, but that committee has committed to a lot of time working with us. And so we'll continue to have meetings as we work through we were already talking this morning about the next advisory committee is Monday? Tuesday, and on Tuesday, a big overwhelming job for them will be to review the feedback we receive from parents from tomorrow night and Wednesday night's meetings. So we're really relying on them to help us through this process. So here's the process. I'm having to click 2 things here, so, and you know I'm not that good. I'm in the right place, though. All screens look the same to me. Okay, so the process is that Mike and I will generate some preliminary analyses. And we did that before we met with an advisory committee. We did 2, I think. We did one analysis that was focused solely on utilization. We told the computer, use all of the school buildings in Moore County as best as you possibly can, okay? It still paid attention to proximity, trying to assign students to their closest school. But other than that, that's what it did. And boy, oh boy, it turned out some really beautiful data. Every school was equally utilized. We loved that. But there were a lot of faults with it, okay? And so then we went through, the main number of faults had to do with feeder patterns. It had kids going every which way from elementary to middle and middle to high. And it was a lot of student movement, okay? And sometimes you didn't get a lot of bang for your buck with that movement. You know, a computer doesn't really think about a child as a child or a human being. It thinks about a child as a number. And so we said, well, you know, we're going to look at that because it produced some good data, but we're going to tweak it ourselves and make some changes. So we had 2 analyses that Mike and I created. We presented it to Moore County staff to look at. Then we presented it to the advisory committee to look at and to give us feedback. And from all that, we produced what we're going to show you today as draft 1, okay? Again, it's the first step. It's really just the very beginnings, because what you see today, it will be similar to what we end up with, but there'll be plenty of changes from point A to point B at the end, okay? And then tomorrow night we get parent feedback on draft 1, and we go through the process again, where we take everybody's feedback, advisory committee, staff, parents now are in the mix, and we present a draft 2. Thank you. You did that for me.
Yep.
Thank you. We present a draft 2. Then we have parent meetings again. We've already got them scheduled. You'll see the timeline at the end of this presentation. We do it all over again, and each time we present a new draft, we're getting a little deeper and deeper in fine-tuning things, okay? The real fine-tuning comes from the parents in the community, because they know where the neighborhood lines are. They know who's considered a community, who's not considered a community. They know some of the history of assignments that plays into this somewhat. So we'll be fine-tuning it from draft 1 to draft 2 to draft 3. And then at some point, that draft 3 becomes Dr. Bob's recommendation. Okay? Right. All right. In addition to the guiding principles, we also look at some other things. We have some other things here. Impact area. I've been doing school assignment stuff for 15 years, but this is the first time I've ever done an assignment proposal that involved the whole district. Last year, we just did Area 1, because we were looking at McDeeds Creek Elementary School. This year, we're looking at the whole district, okay? So that's the impact area. Additionally, we're opening 3 new schools, okay? We're looking at utilization. We're trying to utilize our buildings to the best possible. We're looking at transportation. You know, John Barath is saying, well, wait a minute, I can't take this bus this way because it dead ends. It always has to be a circular route, you know, not a bus driver or anything like that, but there's some things that make sense and provide for efficiency, so we look at transportation. We do look at proximity. The computer does that, actually, tries to assign students to every school, but that's not always possible given where people live and the density across the district. And you're going to see we've got some density maps to show you, because when you see those density maps, they're real eye-openers. Okay? Everybody's just not evenly distributed across the school district. And all the schools aren't perfectly spaced across the school district. It's never going to be like that. So that becomes problematic. And then we look at proficiency scores. We're not moving children based on proficiency scores, but we're monitoring and comparing, because we're trying to bring a balance to our schools, okay? The scenarios that we presented to the advisory committee were just the starting point. Today, draft 1 is just the first step along the way. And by October, which is a long way from now, we'll get to the superintendent's recommendation, okay? All right, at the very first meeting with the advisory council, we thought it was very keen to make sure we're all on the same page about desired outcomes, okay? Because if not, if you're dealing with the whole district, you could just be all over the map, okay? So we said, well, let's settle on some desired outcomes. Last year, when we worked on McDeeds Creek Elementary attendance area, we left some unfinished business. So that is definitely one of the desired outcomes. It's actually the second bullet in this list. We're opening 3 new schools. That's on the desired outcome list. What will the attendance areas be for those 3 new schools? And then from the advisory council, and this also came out of the guiding principles, they felt that it was important, since we're looking at the whole school district, that we should address to the extent possible utilization across the district. We don't want under-enrolled, over-enrolled schools. If we can bring some balance, we want to do that, okay? And then finally, to the extent possible, if we can balance student demographics across our schools, we would like to do that. Both of these things become difficult given the density of the population across the district. But these are our 4 areas for desired outcomes. All right, like I said, we met with the advisory committee 3 times now, all really good meetings, and all had really good pizza for dinner. It was nice, wasn't it? But these are just some of their general comments. You look at that and you say, well, is that all they said? No, they said a lot, but these are just some general comments. They said, and this came out of, remember we had subgroups, Area 1, Area 2, Area 3. They said, consider looking at the high school lines. And we didn't really have that on the table, but they said, let's consider looking at the high school lines and possibly the Area 2 in Northmore. Can we utilize those school buildings better than we're utilizing them? So we added that to our list. They said, remember I told you we had the computer-driven utilization analyses, and then the one we tweaked by hand because it made too many feeder pattern choppiness. They said, we'd like to consider both of those and combine parts of both of those. And so that's what you're going to see today in draft 1, okay? They were very concerned about bus travel time. If you're looking at the whole district, you know, just because the computer says you live on the east side and we're going to bus you to the west side, that's not the best plan, but the computer doesn't know any better than that. So they're very concerned about that. And also they were concerned, even if you did have longer bus rides, you're going to have trouble finding bus drivers. You know, that's a problem with every school district across the state, for sure. They're very concerned about utilization and demographic concerns around Pinehurst, West End, and West Pine. They basically wanted to see desired balance among demographics and proficiency across the district, elementary and middle. They were very concerned about the growth at Vass Lakeview. We addressed it some last year with the opening of McDeeds Creek, but they're still super concerned about that school's going to get crowded too fast. And they suggested that Cameron become a player in the solution to that. Okay, we had talked about that last year, and that was some of our unfinished business. So it was interesting that they brought that up. And then lastly, they gave us some really great suggestions on improving the maps, just to make it easier to understand for everybody. Okay, and so we'll definitely tomorrow night we'll be incorporating some of their suggestions on that. So that was some of the feedback from the advisory council. And now we're just going to make your head spin, because you can't really see any of this, so just bear with me. But that long table represents all of the data we look at, school by school. And we start with the school name. We report out the minority representation at each school. Let me note, we don't do anything with minority representation. We don't move neighborhoods based on minority representation. We're just reporting it out, okay? And we'll report it out in every draft we bring you. The next columns are giving you 2 years' worth of average daily membership. Thank you, Mike, for making it bigger. 2 years' worth, 17-18 and 18-19. And then we give you the breakdown. Who is attending each of your schools? Take, this presentation shows Aberdeen. Can you switch it to elementary for me? Aberdeen Elementary has 667 elementary students who live in their attendance area who attend Moore County schools. Okay, 667 elementary students. But they don't all attend Aberdeen. A big chunk of them do. 602 attend Aberdeen, or 90%, which is great. Matter of fact, all the schools, I mean to be talking to y'all, but I want to make sure they're hearing me too. all of your schools have high percentages of students who live in the attendance area actually attend that school, which is really good, okay? Then the next column shows non-base. There are other students who attend that school too, besides the ones who live in the attendance area. And that's the non-base students. And how do they get there? Do they sneak in? No, they get there by way of a transfer request. A lot of times it's teachers' children or other reasons, okay? Then the next set of columns, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, gives the forecasted membership. Forecasted membership. What's the future hold for these schools individually? Based on ORED data. You know how you work with NC State and all the planners from the municipalities give their projections on what neighborhoods are about to be built and this and that going on. And so that goes into a computer and it produces projections. And we project out all the way to 24, 25, okay? But we're going to focus on 22, 23, because that's the year when all of the new schools and stuff all are in place. So everything we look at from this point forward is 22, 23. Keep that in mind. All right, and then at the end of that group, we give the actual number of children we project will grow by. And sometimes there's no growth at all, and in some cases it's big growth, like Vast Lakeview, projected to grow by 189 students by 2022. So that's a hot one right there. All right, and then we get into utilization, the 18-19 utilization, 19-20, 2021, all the way out to 22-23. That's our target year. And then finally, we give you 3 years' worth of proficiency data, English language arts and mathematics, just to give you a picture of what's going on at that school, okay? And then lastly, you can't see it, but on the screen, at the very far right, there's some information that looks at certain columns. It looks at the minority percentage, it looks at the utilization, 22, 23, and it looks at English language arts proficiency. I could pick any of those proficiencies, but I strongly believe reading is fundamental, so I always go with English language arts. So that you have something to go by, because we're going to show you current, and we're going to show you proposed. And you can compare those two things, all right? Now, looking at all those columns, by now you're like, oh my God, I can't do this, you know, but we're going to simplify it. And we've narrowed it down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. They're boxed in blue. And the bottom chart are the columns we really want to focus on. Okay? Not that we're not paying attention to all the data, but let's rein it in a little bit. And so from this point forward, we're just going to show you the shortened data. But the long version will always be in the addendum. Everything we do is very data-based, one of the guiding principles. Questions on that? Same as last year, except all the data's been updated.
One thing I will add is the forecast numbers that we're using not only incorporate the ORED land use study data, but we also updated the forecast with current membership. So the forecast that we're using is the latest and greatest data based on this year's membership. And there was some changes, but by and large, it mirrors what we were using last year.
So if I recall, when we got the land use study, I believe it was almost a year ago now, a year and a half, January of 2018?
The report was was presented to the board in January of 18. The data was based on December 2017.
So the chart that's back there that has the capacity chart, is that what you're saying you've updated? Will we have a copy of that updated chart?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in the addendum.
Okay. Good, thank you.
And that would be as of what month, Mike?
Last month, so March.
Okay, March 2019.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right, just to review, draft 1 is based on balancing district-wide utilization at the elementary and the middle school level, okay? And to the extent possible, we're looking at feeder patterns. Draft one also assumes the new Aberdeen area and Southern Pines Elementaries are gonna open in 2021. The new Pinehurst School opens in 21-22. All new schools have capacity of 800. You'll see that in the charts. And again, our target year in all of our data is 22-23, when all the new is open and ready, has children in it. Draft one also assumes the possibility of putting a modular classroom on Cameron. Their core capacity is larger than their classroom capacity at this time, so they can easily take a modular classroom if we needed extra seats. So we've built that into this model. And again, the target year 22-23. So here we go. After working since February 4th, this becomes our draft one or step one in our path to the superintendent's proposed assignment plan.
Catherine, can you increase so that you blow it up just a little bit, please? Thank you.
Oh, that's good.
Thank you.
All right, that's really good, Catherine, thanks. Before she blew it up, we had two charts. The top one,
We're gonna need a little help.
Oh.
Kent, could you help align the table so, yeah.
We'll look at the top one first.
yeah, let's look at the
Yeah.
top one first.
Start with,
Yeah, okay. The top data shows current, and by current, we are talking 1920. And we're talking 1920 because you already did work last year for the new McDeeds Creek. So we're gonna focus on 1920 and we're calling it current. We've got every school with the shortened version of data, okay? And then if you look to the right, Catherine, if you could just go over to those minority utilization and proficiency. What we like to focus on is in each column, we look at which school has the maximum minority percentage, which has the minimum, what's that range? 51-point range. That's not very balanced if you got a big fat range like that. We look at utilization. One of those schools currently for the 1920 year will be at 117% utilization, and one of those schools is going to be at 61% utilization. And all the other schools are in between there, okay? Another big range, okay? To balance that, we want to bring that range down. We're not going to get perfect, but we want to make some steps in the right direction. And then the proficiency, we're not really moving children based on proficiency, but we want to see what's going on with the numbers there, okay? So currently, we have one school performing at 81%, another one performing 47%, that's another big range, 34%, okay? So we look at minimum and maximum in each column, and then, Catherine, if you can make it smaller again for just a minute, then we go school by school and compare those same three sets of data. The bottom set of data is if draft one became the assignment plan, what would the schools, what would the end result be? And so now we go school by school looking at the data, okay? And you can't see it, but Aberdeen is currently at 71% utilization, and draft one brings their, not utilization, currently at 71% minority representation, and draft one brings that to 65% minority representation. So we're reducing, the word I just drew a blank, we're reducing the minority percentage, which is a step in the direction we want to go. We do not want racial isolation. That's what I was trying to think of. On the utilization, that school that had 117% utilization, that was West Pine. In draft one, West Pine drops to 80% utilization. That's a step in the right direction, you see. So we look at individual schools. And now, Catherine, blow it up to the three things on the right so I can see both the current and the next, please. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And so now, look, current, remember we had under minority representation, a high of 71, a low of 20, a range of 51. Draft 1 changes that to a high of 65%, a low of 20, and a range of 45. So that is headed in the right direction. It may not be where we want to be. And remember back when we talked about guiding principles, we might not ever get to where we want to be, but if we're moving in the right direction, we feel good about it. Look at utilization. From 117 and 61, draft 1, the maximum is 104%, the minimum is, 68%. The range dropped from 56 points to 37 points. We were quite pleased about that. But there probably is still room for improvement, and that's where the input from parents and the advisory committee as we work through the process will help us. And then, again, we're just reporting out English language arts, not a significant change there, but a little bit of improvement as far as balance, okay? So this is elementary draft 1.
Okay, would you stop for just a minute and just be sure you make clear, the operative variable is building utilization.
Building utilization.
So you didn't move based on minority, you didn't move based on proficiency, you moved based on building utilization.
Right.
And then you use the other two measures to kind of evaluate the guiding principle, the whole guiding principle conversation came in to where by changing building utilization, is that heading us in the right direction regarding the
Absolutely.
guiding variables, principles? Is that an accurate?
Absolutely accurate. Thank you for emphasizing that. It's important to emphasize that. Remember, we had two analyses. One was a computer-generated utilization, and the other one was looking at feeder patterns. And the advisory committee said, let's blend these two. And so draft 1 becomes the blend of those two. Utilization is what we're really keying in on, but we're also looking at racial composition and proficiency.
So at this point, West Pine School is
West Pine Middle or elementary?
West Pine Elementary. It's at capacity or is hovering?
Well, let's go ahead and, currently?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and look at the current layout. So we look at West Pine Elementary School, which is second from the bottom.
Okay.
And
Okay.
currently, 1920, right at 100%. So
Okay.
right there at capacity.
And if I recall, so that's next year's capacity
Yeah.
estimate.
This-
And if I recall from our conversations last year, we were not talking about, we sort of identified that 95% was a target that we wanted, that would start to be a conversation about being at full capacity was really at 95%.
Either redistricting or construction, yeah,
Right.
is where that initiates that conversation.
Okay.
You've got the guiding principle of balance, and you've got the guiding principle of planning. So it's important where you are now. It's also important what the data says where you'll be in 2022-23. So if you look ahead to 2022-23 current, and again, using West Pine Elementary as an example, you would be at 117% in 2022-23 if you made no change, if you just left it alone. So the guiding principle of planning is the one that would add importance to your discussion about balance. There's more to it than that, but that's what starts, you know, that's what initiates the discussion.
And just to point out the red capacity numbers, those are your new buildings for Aberdeen. For the Cameron 400, that's if we were to put a modular unit on the campus. McDeeds Creek is a new building with 800 capacity. Pinehurst would be the new building, and Southern Pines would be the new building. That's why those numbers are in red. Okay? Any
And
other?
Cameron as well, with the large modular.
Yes,
And it's in red the year that those buildings would start the new capacity.
Yeah, the new capacity would
Well,
start.
actually, the capacity for Aberdeen and Southern Pines, when they open in 2021, but we're just showing the 22 column
Okay.
here.
Right.
Got it.
If you had all those years there, it would trigger
sir.
in 2021, right?
Okay, and take a note on Southern Pines, their current capacity, that's the combination of the K2, 3, 5 school, is 990. And so the new building, it's a slight reduction in capacity there. But everywhere else, we have an increase in capacity. Okay?
And McDeed's Creek is in Southern Pines.
Yes, that's part of the unfinished business.
Right.
Absolutely, yes. When we did McDeed's Creek last year, we limited any changes to Area 1. And that left the school building itself sitting in the Southern Pines attendance area. So we knew that was unfinished business, so we're going to talk about that. All right, so here's the data. I think it's really important to look at data before you look at maps, but maps are important too. Okay, so now we look at maps. All right, on the left is the current elementary attendance areas by color, okay, by color. And on the right is the draft 1 or the step 1 attendance areas by color. You can't really see it from here, but we also have on the right side, the old attendance areas are the red lines. So, Ms. Catherine, can you zoom in on the right map? And look at the school, let's see, what's a good one to look at? Look at Cameron, the dark blue on the far eastern side. You see, dark blue is Cameron, but you see the red line on the southeast side of it? And then we have dark blue after that line? That basically means in this proposal, Cameron's attendance area expands a little bit from what it was, okay? And you can look at every school and see little changes like that. Don't try to absorb it all right now because it's a lot, okay? It's a lot. But you look from school to school, compare the color to where the red line was, and you can see what the proposed changes are. This is the elementary level. I think, do we have the middle school lines on this map, Mike?
No.
No. We have a map in the addendum that shows the same map, but it also shows the middle school lines and the high school lines, so you can see feeder patterns at that point, okay? But that's a pretty complicated map, all right? So we're not going to dig deep into this today because it's just really going to take a lot of time for you to absorb it, but we're showing you the data, we're showing the map, okay? That would go with the data. Again, draft 1 is step 1 in this process. Any questions?
Is it fair to say that some of the smaller, I look at like Pinehurst and Southern Pines, and it looks like a smaller area, and that has to do with density? Are we going to see
Absolutely.
the density map too?
Absolutely.
Because the other ones, there's a lot of land that there's
Yeah.
potentially nobody living on.
If you guys don't mind, it might be a good time to go jump to a density map, just so you can get a sense of what complications there are. Catherine, it's in the addendum, if you jump way ahead. You're doing a really great job over there.
Come to my limits here.
Aw.
We can just,
Kim's- There you go.
Is the addendum at the end of the PowerPoint?
It's,
Yes.
yeah,
slide 26, 27 in there.
any one of those three. Okay, so this is a map, there, thanks for making it bigger, showing the middle school lines in orange. Thank you for blowing it up. And then the colors represent student density. And these are middle school students.
They were K-12.
K-12 students
Yes,
across
K-12.
the county. But you can see the darker and the bigger the blob means the more students. So you've got some serious concentrations of students in certain areas of your county, but you also got big swaths of the county where there's not big concentrations of students. that complicates everything considerably. Okay, so we have a map like this in the addendum for the elementary lines, the middle lines, and the high school lines. And that's a pretty big driver as to where the students live, okay? Don't feel bad. I don't think there's any school district in the United States that has students evenly distributed across the county. That's typical, okay? That's typical, and that's what makes the job pretty hard. Okay, back to the presentation.
I'll remark that the advisory committee used that density map to great effect. They wouldn't look at any changes unless they knew approximately if it's a lot of students or a few students. So it's valuable for them.
Right. Okay, so draft one, we showed you the elementary data, we showed you an elementary map. It's really, you're going to have to take some time to really study that. And we've got a good bit of time built into the process, so don't worry about that. Let's look at the middle school now. Next slide. Thank you, Tim. Same thing with the middle school data. We give you the current information for all of your middle schools, and then we give you the draft one end results, school by school. And then on the right side, we look at those maximum, minimum numbers. I don't think you need to blow it up, but the minority representation had a range of 41, and draft one takes it to a range of 36. Utilization, which is the biggest thing here, currently we have a range of 65. That's from 140% to 75%, a range of 65 points. And the proficiency ranges from 76 to 47, a range of 30 points. Draft one, the key one in utilization, brings our utilization from a range of 65 points to a range of 26 points. We are distributing our students for utilization across the district. It did a really good job with that. And at the same time, it improved those other statistics a little bit, okay? But the utilization was the driver here.
But Mike, could you comment on how you looked at the middle school capacity at High Falls and at Westmore or K-8 schools?
Yes. So we looked at historical membership data to determine what an appropriate division is for K-5 and 6-8 for both of those schools. And it's anywhere from 64 to 66% are in K-5 and the remainder in 6-8. So the capacities that you'll see on the middle school tables only count the 6-8 capacity for High Falls and Westmore, and on the elementary schools, it only counts the K-5, knowing that we're going to be combining them. One other thing, notice the total utilization for middle schools in 22-23. It's 99%. So there's not a lot of room to move around with the elementary schools. You're sitting right there at utilization, at peak utilization.
Could we please blow up the draft one table for middle schools? That would be the one on the left, Catherine, not the ranges, but the individual schools.
Down.
Good, we've got 2022. And board members, a lot of interesting things to okay. We could have considered. We'll consider them here eventually. Bit of a challenge going forward as we look ahead to drafts 2 and 3. You can just go the other way, Catherine, so we can see the names of the school. I just need 22. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. Capacity at Cranes Creek, 478. That is classroom capacity, and you can round that up to 500. We still aren't sure why. We've got 478 and 680 something for core capacity. But board members, the core capacity of Cranes Creek is 700, and the classroom capacity at Cranes Creek is 500. That was a cost-cutting decision made at the time that the building was built. And we'd really like to have that 700 right now, that complete capacity, because you can see that West Pine and Southern and New Century are all at 700, same basic design. It's just when we got to Cranes Creek, the decision was made to not add those classrooms. So I don't know that Cranes Creek's been on any of the priority lists, but I think based on the experience that we've had in the last couple of years, it might be a tough sell with the commissioners and the community if we go to build an entirely new, brand new, full-size middle school before we put an addition onto Cranes Creek. So there may be some benefit going forward, and I'm stretching this out a little bit, speaking on behalf of the team that's been working on this, and that includes the advisory committee. We are moving, if we are not already at a point where we have a total number of middle school children between West Pine, Southern, Cranes Creek, and New Century, if we don't already exceed the total capacity of those 4 schools, we're getting there. And so when you look at that planning guiding principle, there may be some benefit in starting the conversation now about finding a way to get another 200 students into Cranes Creek. It's a relatively new school, so it's not on anybody's radar screen. But if there was 200 more, the capacity for 200 more students between those 4 middle schools, it would make this process a little bit easier to do that. Now, that could be accomplished by 2 large modular buildings, those 6 classroom units that have bathrooms in them and a teacher workroom in them. They're safer than the others. They're not as good as a regular building, but they at least buy you some time. We're looking at that at Cameron, but it may be helpful, since we have some time in this process. It might be good to see what we could accomplish with that. But as it is now, you can see with those capacities for 2022, the utilization numbers there on the extreme right, you see Cranes Creek going to 93%. That's 93% against 478 or 500, pick your number. New Century is 94% against 700. Southern and West Pine are still over 100%. The only way to get those down is to move even more children eastward, and that's not an easy task. That's challenging. So I'd like you to, and I invite the public to keep. We need to keep our eyes on those and have some discussion in the community forums and on the advisory committee. That's an area. There's several where we can continue to have some conversation and to try to tweak the plans. But that's an area I think we can all be looking at.
But just to be clear, it's not included. That extra capacity is
No,
not
it's not
currently included in the Cranes Creek.
I don't see a change. There would be a very elaborate discussion with the commissioners that would have to take place in a very short period of time, and history has shown that we're not quite that nimble, but it might be good to get it on their plate here before long. I think before we get to another bond in a few years, that would certainly have to be there with Cameron as well.
Are there opportunities with, when we're done with the Pinehurst Elementary modulars?
Don't know, but that would be one area where you could talk about is that, once we're done with the temporary school, what would be our contractual arrangement, what we might look at lease to own that might be affordable would be one area. The difficulty with that is that then we would have to push that forward early enough in this process so that by draft 2 or 3, that would come into play. Once we've introduced draft 1, and folks look at that, they're already trying to figure out, well, how do I feel about this? That would be a rather substantial change that would occur pretty late in the process. And the idea here is to try to move slowly with this so people can kind of look at it and participate. But I do think that it really does introduce Cranes Creek as a possible point of focus for future construction or investment in 2 large modular buildings. Oh, you can see draft 1 moves you towards balance between Southern Middle and West Pine Middle, but that area is still projected to grow, and so this would be a challenge going forward, because you can see New Century is very close to being full, and certainly Cranes Creek, where it is now at 500 students, is very close. I was impressed by that distribution. We've gone about as far as we can go with those four middle schools, based on their current capacities. To be continued. Yeah. Excuse me.
Okay. So we are looking at the data, but, you know, geography is important too. So we look at the map. Catherine's got that. Again, the map on the left is current middle school attendance areas by color. The map on the right would be the draft one, proposed, step one there. And the right has the orange middle school lines. So if we were to zoom in, you can kind of see where changes are happening there. Mike, you want to point one of those out?
Yes, High Falls up to the north there.
What color is it?
It's
Blue?
the blue.
Blue?
Yes, yeah.
High Falls is
Darker blue.
the darkest blue up the
to
north.
top, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
and you can see the orange line, you can see the blue expands east. So the High Falls attendance area would expand east. And this, where's another one at?
Well, Westmore, you've got expansion.
To the south.
Westmore expands to the south,
The
yeah.
east
Just
and
follow
south
the
side,
orange
right.
lines and the color, okay? It really takes a little while to kind of figure out what's
I
going on.
think a
but
couple of us that are a little bit more familiar with the names might help.
Yes, yes.
So I think Elise Middle School, you see expansion into the east into Carthage and south into West End. And Carthage collapses, New Century collapses in the north, but is extended into McDeeds Creek. Down in the south, you can see where Cranes Creek expands into further into McDeeds Creek. And there's some adjustment between Cranes Creek and New Century. You see sort of a reconfiguration of West Pine Middle. Instead of extending west, it extends southerly, and more of an east-west orientation to Southern Middle and West Pine Middle, as opposed to a more distinct northwest, southeast. If you're trying to extend your middle school population among all 4 elementary schools, that symmetry is helpful, because going forward, if you've got them all pushing up into the mid to upper 90s and even at or above 100%, and not really knowing when relief might come, it's good to have that good balanced distribution, because if you're going to have to go to modular units in the coming years and go over capacity, it's good to be able to distribute it among all 4 schools instead of just having 1 or 2 schools bear that heavy burden.
Which color is the Cranes Creek? Is that the light green on the right?
Yes, ma'am. Sort of the yellow-green.
And are Westmore and High Falls, what happens, is it too early to talk about high schools?
No, we're about to, that's
Okay.
my next
Because
sentence
I
was
was
gonna
wondering
be.
about that.
You know, I originally said we weren't really considering any high school changes, but out of the elementary and the middle school draft one, the advisory committee said, wait a minute now, looking in area 2, it might make sense to look at the high school lines up there, because they pointed out very clearly that, and I don't remember specifically which area it was, it says, well, you've got elementary and middle school students going north to their schools, but then they go south for high school. And they said, wait a minute, if we could tweak these high school lines, then we can clean that up a little bit. So we did introduce just some minor high school changes, nothing really big, but it was based on that traveling and also feeder patterns where whole schools would feed to middle schools and then on to the high school. And Ms. Catherine, if you could focus in on the data on the right, these are our 3 high schools. The little bit of tweaking that the advisory council suggested actually produced some pretty nice results. Looking under utilization, we had a maximum of 135%, a minimum of 106%, of a range of 29.9%. points in the 3 building utilizations, and the little tweaking we did brought that range down to 17 points. It was really, it was good, and some of the feedback was where we lowered that attendance line for Northmore High School, a lot of those students that would be impacted are already by choice wanting to go to the schools that are north of them. So it'll be interesting to see the feedback we receive at the parent meetings, but numbers-wise, it really helped. And then the map that goes with it, again, the only high school changes happen along the Northmore area. If you look on the map on the left, shows the current high school line. The green is where we're looking at. And then the map on the right would be the new Northmore High School line. So it dips a little bit down, okay? But it did have a pretty significant impact on the utilizations, okay? And of course that impacts the elementary utilizations and the middle school utilizations as well. So a little bit of high school tweaking. I don't know that there was any other high school changes, was there?
No.
No, just the Northmore line moving a little bit south.
And even with the high school tweaking, we still have 3 high schools that are way over utilization
Yes,
and a significant problem still there.
yes, yes, yes. Okay. All right, I'm pretty sure I'm over my time here. Thank you for not being mad at me, Tim. But we've got a couple more things we want to talk about through the process so far and over the next months. We're going to be focused on the guiding principles. We're going to be focused on the desired outcomes that are in this presentation, and we're going to be focused on following this timeline, okay? So in the timeline, tomorrow night and Wednesday night, we start our first of a series of community meetings. We'll be at New Century Middle School tomorrow night, and that presentation is primarily for Area 1 and Area 2. Stop me if I'm wrong. And then Wednesday night, we'll be at Southern Middle School, and that presentation will be primarily for Area 3 families to come and dig deeper into this and give us some feedback. The advisory committee will meet again next Monday. On May the 6th, we'll come back. We'll have reviewed all the feedback we've received between now and then, and we'll come back with another step in the direction to get the superintendent's recommendation. It'll be draft 2. And then we'll go through public meetings again. We do want to show you what's in the addendum. I'm not sure, what do you want us to do next?
Well, I think you absolutely want to share the addendum, but I would like to talk just a little bit about our setup and our agenda for tomorrow night and for Wednesday night, just so you're aware of how that process would work. Is our plan for that is that we'll have daycare, child care provided for parents who may need that. So we'll have that at both New Century and at Southern Middle. We'll be meeting in our gymnasiums at both schools. Plenty of seating provided for that. We'll begin our evening with quick introductions, and Mike and Laura walking through this very similar PowerPoint than what they've shared with you this afternoon, and sharing the process, the background, the data, and then the actual initial draft. We then will spend the rest of our evening, which will be, I would imagine, 45 minutes or more, with what we might call a gallery walk feedback process, where we'll have tables set up in the back of the gymnasium, at least a dozen, at New Century, probably 15 to 18 at Southern Middle, and where we'll have 3 maps on those tables. We'll have a large blow-up of the entire district for draft 1. We'll have a large blow-up for the area. So tomorrow night we'll have Area 1 and 2 blown up at various tables. Wednesday night, Area 3, and then we'll have a large blow-up of the density map. So our parents and our community can see that as well as they're analyzing and giving us feedback on that first draft. There's a couple different ways they can provide that feedback. On their agenda, when they walk in, there'll be a QR code provided on that agenda where our parents and community members can go right with their smartphones to an online portal that'll be available for the next week for them to provide feedback. We also will have comment and question cards where right there at the meeting they can write a comment or write a question and provide that back to staff before they leave. Before we ask them to go and take part in this gallery walk feedback process. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about our next steps, about how we'll use that feedback. And as Laura's already noted, we're coming back together with our advisory committee next week. And we also have an additional meeting we've now planned that wasn't on our original timeline, April 23rd, to make sure we've got plenty of time to analyze the feedback from our community through the online portal, through the comment and question cards. We'll be taking all that back, compiling it, sharing it with our advisory committee, so they're working through that. And that's the frame they have as they look at, okay, what's our next steps? What do we forget? What do we need to be looking at? How do we refine this as we move forward to the second draft? And so that's the process we'll be utilizing. Once folks have had the opportunity to look at it, provide their feedback, we'll have staff, myself, Mike, John, Mike, and Laura, who will be walking around answering questions for clarity. But once parents and community members had a chance to give that feedback, they're then free to leave at that point. But we want to really, tomorrow night and Wednesday night's about our community and our parents having time to give us feedback. And those are the processes we're going to use.
Will there be more than one set of maps in each gymnasium?
There'll be multiple tables. There'll be
Okay.
a dozen tables tomorrow night. There'll be
And they can
15
go to any table they want. They'll all have the
Okay.
same information and the ability to provide feedback. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And they'll have until when to supply online feedback?
I believe we'll have that open until next Monday week.
Well, that's open continuously throughout this process. It's time-stamped
So, but for draft 2, when would we need to have, or feedback on this particular draft?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
We'll be pulling it down for the advisory committee on Monday so we can compile it, but we'll continue to monitor it and pull it down. Any new feedback and comments and questions that we get, we certainly will pull it down again, provided on the 23rd. So we'll have that. That's a process we've been using all along. For example, our last advisory committee meeting, we compiled all the feedback from our community forums where we gave information, where we got questions and feedback there. And we have we had that online portal we've had open already for questions and feedback. So we've been pulling that already and sharing it with our advisory committee.
And are the advisory committee, will they be attending each separate forum respective to the schools that they represent?
They are certainly have been invited. They're aware of it, just like all of our parents and community members. They're welcome to attend and give their feedback, as the board is welcome to attend and observe at our community input meeting.
And Tim, for the areas, for example, the northern Moore area, to where the lines are extending on down further toward Carthage, for the questions that come up regarding transportation, bus transportation and timing for students that will be on the bus, what is our response to those type questions at this point?
It's our expectation that we're going to dive deeper into that, primarily between drafts 2 and 3. But we want folks to give us questions, give us feedback about their concerns about that right now. And our plan right now is to try to dive deep into that and look and analyze that between draft 2 and 3 to make sure we're taking into account that efficiency guiding principle. But those are valid questions. As Laura noted, our advisory committee said we're concerned about this. If we're going to broaden our geographical areas and either lengthen or add additional routes, we're also concerned about finding bus drivers. So that is a concern, that is a priority that we look at that.
Mr. Barath and Mr. Griffin will be present at the community forums and at the advisory committee meeting.
Yes, sir.
I will say that Mr. Barath analyzed each of the areas, gave sort of preliminary analysis of each of the areas, and so there was some final tweaking that took place where we look at transportation loops and major arteries. Sort of a first blush look at reasonably, if there's a collection of students, how quickly do they get to a major artery and can make progress. Now, if you look at the existing map, if you look at the Carthage area, I mean, we've got some very large, expansive areas as they now exist. But when you get down to neighborhood by neighborhood, that's where community input over the next 2 nights is going to be very important, because we have not gotten down. Visitors to the community forums are going to find cases where one street goes one way and one street goes the other. that's a certainty. Some of that's going to be found, and that's not desirable. So when people notice that, it's okay. You don't have to get worried. Just point that out, because that's part of draft one, and that's no different than any other draft one that you have in this process. So there'll be some identification and refinement. That's one of the key areas from draft one to draft two to draft three that you'll continue to see changes in.
That's part of the purpose of tomorrow night and Wednesday night, is
Yep.
to get that feedback and impressions, and feedback that folks, and questions in areas that they may say, well, why did you do that, or that doesn't make sense.
And there's computer programs that are going to help us eventually, but none of that is as good as what folks are noticing when they come to the community forums. I think it starts with what people notice.
You had mentioned that there was unfinished business with respect to McDeed's Creek. At what point will that be addressed?
We've actually addressed it. Let's go back to the elementary. Thank you for bringing that up. But if, Ms. Catherine, if you can zero in on the map on the left. No,
Oh,
let's,
you want it from the original?
yeah, I want to look at the original. Well, yeah, can you go to,
Can you slide it?
there you go.
So one of the points, or the unfinished business point, was that McDeed's Creek, the site of it is outside of the base attendance area. So we did do something about that. McDeed's Creek will now be inside its base attendance area. Another unfinished business point was, are we providing enough relief for Sandhills Farm Life from McDeed's Creek? And you'll notice in draft one, McDeed's Creek base extends to the west for that portion of Sandhills Farm Life. There we go.
Yeah, the
East Creek is
best
the
way
light
to
blue.
see the unfinished business is just go back and forth and visualize.
Yeah.
See how they, see the light blue there, Bruce?
Yes.
That's where, Ms.
Now,
Carter,
just
we
watch
need to
how it
flip
changes.
the charts.
And it goes down further in the Southern Pines.
So the unfinished business in area one had to do with the border between Cameron and Vast Lakeview, the border between Southern Pines and McDeed's Creek, and the border between Farm Life and McDeed's Creek. And so as you get a chance to look at, and as the public gets a chance to blow it up and look at it more closely, you can see where those changes took place. You'll be able to graphically see that graphically, and in the chart, you'll see the numbers adjust.
Will the middle school lines also be here, so we'll see how many middle schools an elementary school will send to?
Yes.
And what is our maximum number of middle schools that are being sent to from one elementary school with this first draft?
Two.
Just two?
Two.
Because you had mentioned before, when you just did utilization, you said it was,
Like one elementary school went to 4 middle schools.
and that's not
That was the
ideal.
worst case scenario,
Yeah.
yeah, that was not good.
In the draft one, is there any elementary schools that are split into 2 middle schools?
Yes,
Oh, yes.
yes.
It's hard to see.
Okay, yeah,
But the max is 2, we just established that the max is 2, which is,
Yeah, instead of the
and right
4.
now, we have a couple of elementary schools that do that, right?
Next year, it'll be Cameron and McDeed's Creek are the only two.
Okay.
It's split into Cranes Creek and New Century.
And before it was Farm Life, right?
Before you had, no, it was just Cameron
Oh, it
before.
was just Cameron, okay.
I will say that the advisory committee is really, they are also focusing on these feeder patterns, and I'm not sure that we still have some unfinished business looking at feeder patterns here, okay? So, draft 2 may come with some changes based on feeder patterns. Ready to look at the addendum?
Mr.
Chair.
Cunningham, did you get your question answered?
Yeah, I can see where McDeed's Creek has shifted considerably from the edge of the district to almost the center of the district.
It goes all the way to Pennsylvania Avenue.
And looks like Connecticut?
Yes, yeah, I think so, yeah.
And then, well, I'll look at the
The big blown-up maps.
big blown-up maps.
Tomorrow.
There,
It's
but,
hard to see here.
And
Yeah, I think it was a very wise decision that we left, about a third of the capacity of McDeed's Creek to be supplemented with Southern Pines. And I think the step-by-step process is preferable, where you sort of establish the primary purpose of McDeed's Creek has been served by reducing crowdedness at Sandhills Farm Life and Vast Lakeview, and then you take the next step.
And just so that I'm remembering correctly with our ORED data, when we did the study, the full study a year ago, that included conversations with all the planning departments about what additional housing units were approved and all of that. So it would, when we look at the data, it includes some of those, it includes those projections and looking 10 years down the road to ensure that we have space at those schools for when those housing units may or may not have children in them. We don't know that for a fact, but there's some algorithm that determines that. So there is room.
We can bring that up on the screen. It's in the addendum.
Okay, we're going towards the addendum. I guess we
Yes,
should look
yeah,
at the
and we
addendum.
could pull that up. You could talk about it while
Before you do
it's-
that, could you stop at the middle school one like that again as well? Can you blow that one back up?
The right one or?
The
Draft or the regular?
Draft.
The draft.
And the yellow lines here are the
Current
current.
school boundaries.
Okay. And so what we don't know is what the capacity, if we increase Cranes Creek, what that would look like.
Yeah, you'd have to, yeah, if you, it would create a major challenge at this point. But you're gonna have a major, you have a major challenge relative to capacity, but it would certainly expand the Cranes Creek area. How that would look, we don't really know, but we do know that when you end up with all 4 schools at 93 and above, it'll get you good capacity now, but the board and the superintendent are gonna need to work with the commissioners to really get that on the radar screen before long. And then if you make that change, a shift of 200 students, you can no longer just balance it out between New Century and Cranes Creek and Southern and West Pine Middle. You've got to look at all 4 of them at the same time. You really, you've got a lot of students and 700 student schools. If the middle schools were all at 800 like the elementary schools we're building now, that would be very helpful if we had it instead of 700 student schools. But that's going to involve, I don't know that there's any short-term fix to that, but it's certainly going to require a fix somewhere before you get to the long term.
It looks like we've districted a lot of horses to Cranes Creek, but probably not many students.
Well, actually, no. If you go back and look at the chart, as you get a chance to analyze the chart, you'll see that you've got students. That line comes all the way into Southern Pines.
While we're talking about middle schools, I'd like to make a comment that I'd like people to take into consideration when we have these forums the next 2 nights. When the 9th grade students from Southern Middle and West Pine Middle are merged into Pinecrest, we find that the school performance score and student growth both improve over the same measurements in each middle school. Why do Pinecrest performance score and growth go up? I'm not asking you to answer the question, but it's just something I'd like you to think about.
What is there in the?
Shall we move on?
Yeah, the
Okay.
appendix.
Yeah, let's, you can go through the appendix, let the public and the board know what's in there, but also you can stop at the updated projection chart, which will illustrate the middle school challenge, but it will also show that as important as what it is we need to do now, we're gonna need to be attentive to facility capacity going forward.
The requests from the advisory committee are, they had a lot of data that they wanted to see, so we tried to collect as much as we could and put it in the addendum. You'll also see detailed maps of draft one and the full data tables. We won't go into a lot of detail there because it's very hard to see, but this is a legend for the data tables. Laura went through column by column to explain what the data tables, this does the same thing. These are the full data tables, obviously too small to see here, but all that data is included for elementary and middle and high school. The top table in each group is the current, meaning 2019-20, and the bottom table in each group is draft one. This is a detail map. It's a high resolution, so you'll be able to zoom in. I believe there will be a separate PDF document available online that is highly zoomable. You can go down to street level and see it at any resolution you like. The advantage of this full map here is it includes elementary school boundary, proposed draft one elementary areas by color. So all the colors represent the elementary areas. And then you'll see a gold line that represents the middle school, the proposed draft one middle school boundaries. And then you'll see a blue line on top of that, which you can't see in this picture, but on the big map you certainly can. And the blue line represents the high school, proposed draft one high school changes. So the purpose of that is for the community to look and see how those feeder patterns are changing. This is the best way to kind of look inside and see where your child is going to go to elementary and then middle and then high. So as we mentioned, there are some situations where an elementary school is split into two middle schools, and you can identify the areas using this map. This is the updated membership forecast. As before, this is based on ORED data from a year ago, updated with brand new demographic membership data. So that allows us to kind of tweak what we already know is going to happen with growth potential by changes in cohorts that we experienced this year. Some schools were a little bit larger than we thought last year. Some schools didn't grow as much as we thought last year. So all the data is put in here. And I would, as usual, it's color-coded by utilization. And for example, if you look at the bottom table, that's area 3, lots of red in there, especially on the high schools. Area 1, we have some crowding issues for high schools, of course, and in some of the elementaries. These do not reflect draft 1 changes. These are 2019-20 boundaries.
Do these reflect the updated capacity with the 4 new schools?
They don't.
They don't. Okay, so the red is
Current capacity.
is current capacity, so that is important to keep in mind.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Because we worked hard to get rid of some of those red with the new schools, so.
What we can do is we can give, well, I think the data tables actually spell that picture out better than these could.
Right, right. And you were just using this to help
Yes,
consider
this is the primary input
capacity.
for those longer view numbers that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually there's a kind of a flat space in middle schools for the next 2 years or 3 years, and then it starts growing up again. So information like that is helpful when we're drawing future lines.
But it's current schools and current capacities. Okay.
We've mentioned these before. These are 3 different maps with K-12 student density using the elementary school base, current elementary school base, middle school base, and high school based. The density maps are unchanged, just the outlines change. The advisory committee also requested some transfer data. I realize this is too small, but this is for you to see. But this is data that tells us how students transferred from within the district to outside the district, and from outside the district to inside the district over 2016 and 2017. And this next table is a drill down of that same data. There we go. The advisory committee also requested an intra-transfer table. That's what you're looking at here. So this is a table of schools in Moore County schools that sent students from one Moore County school to another Moore County school. We have learned that there is an error in this table in the Southern Pines primary row. If you scan along Southern Pines, I don't know if this thing works. Yeah, not well. Southern Primary, SPP, Southern Pines primary, you'll see a 19. That 19 should go to Vass Lakeview.
And that'll be corrected when we do
Yes,
draft,
yes.
yeah,
We
at
just
some
don't have the
point.
corrected table, yes. So yes,
Just have to have the right people in town to do that. So we noticed that last week and just weren't able to make that change. But let's make sure that we don't forget to make that change as soon as we can.
And finally, there's some information on the non-Moore County school systems within the county. Charter school impact by city, and the same data broken down by grade. Around 850 kids, and this was current year, so this is current data here, 2019. Around 850 kids currently reside within the county but attend a charter school. And that includes the virtual academies that are in North Carolina too. There's 2 of them.
But not homeschool, right?
Not homeschool.
I notice you have Seagrove up there.
Yes. This is like the city of residence. So I guess the closest I can come to it is if their residence address goes to a certain post office, that's what we'll see up here.
Okay, they live in Moore County, but get their
They live in
mail at
Moore
a Seagrove
County,
address,
yes,
okay.
Yeah, yeah. We had to get some clarification on that. And finally, for home schools and private schools, this data is from last year. There are about 950 home schools in the county, holding a total of about 1,600 kids. Surprising. That's as detailed data as we can get for the home school. For private school, there's 13 private schools and a grand total of 1,226 students going to private school.
On the transfer is that, not transfer, that one, charter school impact. Scotland County didn't, or Laurinburg didn't have anybody coming into the charter schools?
These are Moore County domiciled students, not,
That are going to Rayford?
Apparently, there's a piece of Rayford's,
Zip code,
yeah.
that's by
Okay.
zip code,
South
yeah.
County, yeah.
It'd be by zip code, so that means that they're, that would
Yeah,
mean
I
there's
think
somebody
that's-
lives in Moore County with a Rayford zip code?
That's what I understand, yes.
I'll have to look at that.
Well,
I'm not sure I understand that, but,
that's-
It could be a P.O. box or something.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
Based on data that's in Power Schools, we verify their residents in Moore County. That's done on a monthly basis when we get billed for this charter school payment.
these are actual students, so there could be a hiccup in how that's reported, but it'd be an actual child there. So to change that for that purpose, because we're
I was just
suspicious, would
curious, because I
make
just
it
know
inaccurate, yeah.
back and forth.
Likewise, there's Moore County residents that do have a Seagrove zip code, even though Seagrove's in Randolph County.
And that's the end. Are there any questions on the addendum data?
Again, board members, if I could emphasize, what the staff is looking for is feedback from you regarding the fidelity of the effort to date in the context of the guiding principles, your desired outcomes, process, and timeline. So anything you have to offer in closing, we would appreciate as we go to the community forums and to the advisory committee meeting next week. Madam Chair.
I think from my perspective, it seems to me that having all of the having the support of both of you in terms of looking at the way the data is used and how to collect it and use it appropriately in your algorithms is beneficial. Obviously, it is not enough, and hearing from the community members themselves this week when they look at the actual lines is going to be really beneficial as well. And so to me, the process seems very strong because it's, you start with it being data-driven, but then you open it up for community feedback. And it sounds like the advisory committee has been giving you feedback all along, too, to show where the software, for instance, doesn't know how these lines are. So I think to me it seems that from what we started out with, starting in December and January, talking about this, very similar to how we approached it last year. It seems that the fidelity with the process and the data and the timeline seems like we have enough time to get all the input. So I appreciate all the work that you have to go in there. And I like seeing that McDeeds Creek has been, there is a solution to that where we had left it last December. We knew we weren't done with that. But there's other opportunities for us to look at the lines, both for middle schools and apparently some of the high school ones too, which will be one that we really need some input from the community on.
Yeah, I have no problem with the process up to this point at all.
And when will this information be available online?
As quick as we can get it linked, we'll work with
This afternoon, right?
And is that will be typically where it is with our agenda online?
Yes, ma'am.
It'll be, okay.
Well, we have a portal for the whole redistricting process, and we have a calendar there where presentations are separated out. Will this be there?
Go to the homepage at ncmcs.org. Right there on the homepage, there's redistricting information. You click here, and it goes to the page with the timeline, all the presentations that have been given, the advisory council, the FAQs, the guiding principles, all of that information is posted on there.
Including this presentation will be found there,
That's where this will be uploaded.
as well as the school board, as well as the school board link, but it's
Okay.
2 clicks there, and it's 3 or 4 clicks there. So.
Well, and there's also the link there for the feedback, right? So that's the feedback. If they submit feedback on that link or through the QR codes tomorrow, that is what is included in the what goes back to the advisory committee to review and look at.
I was very impressed of how the process allowed the draft to sort of grow and morph, and the advisory council obviously having a lot of impact. There's a lot to absorb and that we'll need to look closely at. This is a huge step, I think, in the right direction. I don't intend to be flippant at all when I say that about halfway through your proceeding, John Lennon's song "Imagine" jumped into my mind. Imagine there's no countries, because you have to change the way you think. Imagine there's no town city limits. In order to appreciate this, you have to move to a different way of looking at how we divide our districts.
I have some concerns and questions, but I really want to hear from the public first before I implement or say them. I don't want to put anything in anyone's mind about certain situations. And I really want to look at those maps. Like, I want to get home and look at them, because it's really hard to see on a screen, and we don't have the link yet. So I don't want to say too much on that. But the process has been great.
Yeah,
Don't get me
I
wrong.
think so.
The process has been great. Yeah, you really utilizing all of our beliefs, and so.
Anything else?
I think a sort of an unspoken guiding principle, or one that comes within, sensitive to the needs of the families, is that we're not interested in moving students more than once. I don't know whether that was articulated as a guiding principle, but somewhere in it is that notion, and
Do it right.
yes, we want to do it right, but we don't want to yank people around, students around, and I think that the parents will appreciate that.
And I think we've already talked about that this wouldn't all happen at once anyway, that this would be rolled out. Whatever the final decisions are, it would be rolled out over several years or a couple years.
Two-year period.
2 years, when each of the new elementary schools, when the elementary schools open.
And there's nothing in today's presentation that involves what'll happen in year one and what'll happen in year two. And I don't know that we'll even get there in draft two. That might have to be. That might have to be for draft three.
This is more the pure vision at the end. What will the end state be?
Well, today we just needed to know if we've demonstrated fidelity with regard to your guiding principles, your desired outcomes, your process, and your timeline. There'll be board members, like anyone else, can find a street that can move here or there, or a line that can move around. We'll get plenty of input from the public on that. What we need to know, in addition to that, from you all, we need to know you approve the guiding principles, desired outcomes, process, and timeline, and so we just need to know that we're within that framework. And get the impression that we are, unless somebody's.
Very comfortable with how we're going.
Yeah.
And like Stacy, we're not making decisions. We're staking ourselves out on positions at this point. But the framework is very useful.
And I'd just like to add, obviously, this is a draft. It's the first rendering. And tomorrow night and Wednesday night will be the opportunity for folks to really get up close and personal, so to speak. And I hope that many of them will avail themselves of that opportunity and then give us the feedback with how they think things are going. It's still wide open for change. Obviously, there will be changes. And hopefully we will all, wait for the blow up on our iPads or the big maps tomorrow night and have a chance to really look at the lines and see where they are. Because this is pretty difficult on these screens. But I do really appreciate the addendums on there and the background data that really, truly does make a difference as we look at these numbers.
I think following up what Libby said is Ed and I are probably the only two here who can remember when Village Acres was districted into West Pine Elementary, 10 years ago, and parents came and they said, we drive right by Pinehurst Elementary, and people convinced the board that you have to be flexible and adjust, and so public input is important and will be considered.
And I'll just make a plug to put it in on that form online so that it's all in the same place. I think it really is helpful if it's all in the same place so that we can look at it all together. So. Well, I thank you. I don't know if there's anything else. I know a few of us might need a little break. We might want to go take a 5 or 10 minute break. But I thank you for your efforts and your work with the advisory committee and with the staff. And I want to thank the advisory committee members who are listening or are in the room. I know it's a lot of effort and time that you have put into it, and we appreciate just the effort that you've put into making this looking at the whole county. Because that's what we're doing. We're looking at the whole county and what are our options and imagining those options.
Reconvene at what time, Madam Chair?
Let's give us 10 minutes.
15 minutes after.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Back to order. Thank you for
With your
giving us-
permission, Madam Chair, at this time, I'd like to invite Diane Fay forward with Bridget Johnson. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. We are here to seek your approval of the academically and intellectually gifted plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Diane, who's going to hit some of the highlights.
So every 3 years, we write an AIG plan, and that's to keep us in compliance with the state legislation that guides gifted education. We adjust our plan as their standards for gifted education adjust. So they've had some pretty significant changes in their standards, which led us to make some changes as well. We've also learned a little bit more in this process and been more aware of some research that's coming out with regards to identification and screening. So there are 3 biggest changes in the plan. One deals with our identification criteria. We currently have a non-traditional pathway that helps us look for students who are underrepresented and gifted. We'd like to shift that pathway to rely less on testing data, which we currently use, and more on an overall student portfolio. So really looking at those students and their thinking in ways that go beyond the testing. The second big change we're proposing in this plan is with our AIG screening. We currently do a mass screening of all students in 4th and 6th grade, and we'd like to move our 4th grade screening to 2nd grade. What we're finding is that we're doing a lot of testing of 3rd and 4th graders to begin with, one-on-one, and if we move it earlier to 2nd grade, it gives us a better data point, provides some support for the research that tells us if we identify our underrepresented students earlier, we're more likely to catch them before the achievement gap gets too great. It also helps us reduce the one-on-one testing that the AIG teachers are doing now. Our third big change is with the AIG transfer policy. We do have a lot of students who transfer from other districts or other states, and they come already identified as gifted. Our current policy says they have to wait and meet our criteria, so we either wait for their paperwork and verify it, or in some cases we have to retest them. And we've been in some uncomfortable conversations with parents where kids were qualified in another district and then failed to meet our qualifications here. And that's a really hard conversation, as you may guess. So what we're proposing is that we change to basically accept any student who comes in with qualified paperwork. So if they come in with paperwork that's signed from another district, we're going to honor that placement, and then we'll adjust our services as we need to meet their needs.
And I would like to add, that's consistent with the Military Interstate Compact. And if you're going to comply with the spirit of the Military Interstate Compact, it would be appropriate to apply that to all children, irrespective of their alignment with military. We have a lot of these, but I really picked up on all 3 of those, Diane, and I want to compliment you and everyone else, Bridget, who contributed to these. These are very sound. It does obviously come with my recommendation, but very, very sound recommendations. We have about 40 or 50 other pages here. Yes. Would the board like Diane to go through all of them, or do you think you have enough?
Take her word for it.
About how many teachers do we have certified as AIG?
So we have currently 10 AIG positions that are serving directly the AIG students. We have some other teachers that are licensed beyond that. We have currently 1 position that's vacant. Within those 10, we'd love to fill it. If anybody knows an AIG certified teacher that's willing to fill that one. But that's what we're working with right now is 10 teachers.
At one time, the consortium was working with Moore County to help the teachers become certified. Mm-hmm. What's happening with that? Anything going on?
Not with the consortium anymore. When the standards shifted, it required a 4-course sequence from Institute of Higher Ed to get your add-on licensure, and that's when the districts lost the ability to kind of do their own program to get add-on licensure. We can still offer professional development, and that's one of the things that we're going to be kind of revamping and rolling out with this new plan in August. The teachers now also have the option to take a gifted education praxis. So that was new as of last summer. The state board approved the praxis, and so you can now get your add-on through that as well. So we'd like to encourage our teachers to do that.
Just to say that the word praxis brings me back.
That's better than Pearson.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Since we're going to take the screening process out of fourth grade and put it down into second grade, obviously, any testing we can remove from our third and fourth graders. That's a great,
Yes.
great step. But that means that we'll be adding students to the program earlier than they normally would have.
That's the goal.
And I understand that, and grabbing them as we can. But since we're having trouble getting AIG teachers, what does that mean to the numbers then that will go into these AIG classes?
So we currently identify students in K2, which is a little unusual. Most districts don't start until third grade, although the state requests that you have a procedure K-12. So we have students who we identify in second grade. It probably won't change our numbers significantly to move that screening. What we look at doing is there's a twofold process to the identification. One's ability testing, which is what the screener is, and then we do an achievement test. And so likely with the timing, we'd do the ability at the end of second grade and then pick up with the achievement at the beginning of third grade. We can use the BOG results to help us in that process. So we won't probably be identifying a whole lot more students until third grade.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you. It's very thorough. I did read some of those pages, by the way,
Yes.
and it was very helpful.
We have a lot of parents that do actually.
It was
read
very helpful.
All 45 of them.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Item 3B, endorsement of K3 class size verification report. What is it, about the third time we've gotten this same information
sir.
this fall?
It's going to be short and sweet.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is time for the superintendent to submit the affidavit attesting to Moore County Schools' compliance with state law 2017.9, also known as HB 13, the K3 class size law. Per this law, the district K3 class size average this year may not exceed 1 to 20, and no individual K3 classroom may be in excess of 1 to 23. Just today, the state opened up the legislative class size report, which collects this and other related data based on enrollment as of February 28th. Initial reviews of these reports lead me to believe that we have the same errors we did in the fall. However, even by these reports, we are still well within the state mandates. These reports, while used for data analysis, are not what dictates compliance with the law. Through our own analysis of K3 class sizes, we are confident that we are completely in compliance with the 1 to 20 district average and the 1 to 23 classroom maximum guidelines outlined by the law. As of this afternoon, our district class size average is 17.7 in all classes, 16.83 in English language arts classes, which is the standard. When you remove the small EC self-contained classes from the calculation, your class size averages increase to 19.14 for all classes and 18.81 in ELA, again the standard, still within state guidelines. In addition, we do have 12 classrooms at 3 schools that exceed the 23 student maximum. However, in all cases, these are elective classes that are larger due to EC self-contained students joining their non-disabled peers during encore classes. K3 legislative class size is based on ELA classroom enrollment, so these 12 classrooms do not push us out of compliance. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well done, Kate. Thank you.
When you say there are errors in the report, what are we talking
The
about?
numbers that I'm coming up with for class size averages as of February 28th do not match what the report is showing, is what most of the errors are related to.
The
It's
report
same
from
errors we have.
DPI.
The report that DPI runs, yes.
So something in their programming
Yes, ma'am.
is giving errors.
Yes, ma'am.
Not our information giving
No,
errors.
ma'am.
Okay.
And I will say, what they had us do in the fall and what they're already recommending that we do in the spring is that we make a list of the noted errors. We then submit that in a ticket, and then they attach that to our K3 class size. They are getting ready to upgrade to PowerSchool 12, and they're going to revamping this project, this report when they revamped to 12, so they're not going to necessarily make any errors or adjustments to the report this year.
So are other school systems finding the same
Oh, yes.
problem? Okay.
We are by no means alone.
So probably this was a hastily conceived portion of Power School that really wasn't ready to be rolled out.
It is being changed as we are flying the plane.
Essentially, your report, though, is accurate, and you attach then the error report that you're getting from DPI.
When I submit that is a ticket, yes, ma'am. So that's what we will be doing since it just opened today. That's what I'll be spending the next several weeks doing, is essentially just looking at where I have us listed based on the 28th of February, where their reports show, and I'll list off every error, and I'll submit that in a very detailed, multi-paged Google Doc.
And board members, you'll see that I do offer a motion, offer for you, my recommendation that you consider a motion to approve the endorsement of the report. And I'm fully aware of the matters that Kate's brought to your attention, and I am fully confident in the work that she and Mr. Locklear and others have done, and our principals have done to give us a report that I'll sign off on, stake my reputation on it.
Thank you.
With your permission, Madam Chair?
Yes, that's
We've got Ms. Sampson and Ms. Dedman here to offer us a resolution that would endorse April as Month of the Military Child.
Thank you. So good afternoon. I am here in lieu of Dr. Powers, who is away with a family emergency, and Mrs. Sampson will be talking to us about the endorsement for April as being the month of the military child.
Okay, so April is the month of the military child, and this year we have requested that the board consider an endorsement of April as the month of the military child in Moore County schools, and that we consider issuing a proclamation in such effect. So just to go over real quick to give you an idea of what we look like in Moore County schools, we've seen steady growth in our military children. This is impact aid, so these numbers represent about 85 to 90% of what's actually in our district at this time. We've had steady growth in the last 3 years as we've engaged the Military Family Council in my position in revamping that impact aid program. Next slide.
What
happened in 2016?
Well, that was
Rolly wasn't hired? That's what happened?
I realized that you were not
here.
here.
Wasn't utilized. It was also the Military Family Council, the recommendations that they came with at that point, they hadn't been utilized yet. So, in fact, Sarah Bigley was a big part of that next year of really shifting on how we did things, and we've just built on that each year.
We formed the Office of Student Support Services and started taking it seriously. That year was an anomaly, but clearly you can see that there was opportunity that presented itself once there was just a modest investment in a little bit of central district services where we could invest some time in that, and Rolly's position, of course, was very key.
So you probably figure we missed 600 people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and even like this year, we have about 200 forms that we're working with the installation to verify, since they didn't actually come through our school district. There's a second process, so hopefully by the end of this year, we'll do an amendment, and that number will actually be up higher for the school year. These are our top 10 military schools. It gives you an idea of what our population looks in those campuses. We actually have military students in every campus in Moore County. Never mind having military staff on pretty much all of our campuses as well. The blue number are active duty families. So these are the percent of students in those schools who are on active duty. Military connected is when we add those veteran family and retirees into those numbers. So yeah, like I said, and to give you an idea of what that looks like for Moore County, DEERS releases a report that lets us know how many children between the ages of 5 and 18 reside in our county. The military releases that data. Based on those numbers and what I know about what's in our school, we estimate that a good 84% of the students who live in Moore County who are active duty family members reside in our school system. Next slide. And these are some of the big things that are planned this month. A lot of campuses have individual activities, so they all celebrate the month of military child their own way. We have our forum this Friday, so that'll be at Sand Hills Community College. The celebration of the military child is at Pinehurst. I think it's a Kiwanis event in Pinehurst, but we do participate in every year as a school system. I usually go in other representation, and we should have student-to-student children there this year. And then April 12th is Moore County Schools Purple Up Day. So that is the day that we recognize military children by wearing purple. It's typically recognized nationwide, but the actual nationwide date is the day we're on spring break. So we've shifted our date to April 12th.
By the way, there's no excuse if you're an East Carolina, Western Carolina, or James Madison University graduate, you're wearing purple that day.
And to give you an idea, because people always ask, well, why purple? Well, because when you combine the colors of the branches of service, we get purple. Red, white, and blue, little color theory, you know, art history. That's why we use purple for the children. It's inclusive of all of the branches.
Yes.
And then this will be the first year where we really pull the children, their students, I should say, out from the forum, and we have a special event just for them, and we'll work with our student-to-student programs on April 25th. We have a full-day event for them. Any questions?
One
Yep.
more.
Go for it.
Okay. So, I'm guessing a huge percentage of the numbers of kids that you have tracked down are Army children.
Yes, we do. I mean, the majority of our students are Army, but we actually have representation from every branch in our school district.
That's what I was wondering, if we had any breakdown on.
I do actually have all that data. I do track by branch. I can track by rank. I can
Wow.
track by school.
Number of years in the service, age.
Well, data's more estimation because if I track rank, I can make
pretty
some
reliable.
educated assumptions about where they might be career-wise. But yeah, we can break down that data as well.
I'm sorry, you had a survey your first year that you initiated, and you had pretty good data off of that one in
Yes,
terms of
and
per
now that
capita.
now that our impact aid data is more accurate and we've merged that with our military identifier, so we only do one survey every year, that provides me with a much better snapshot of what our district looks like. And Kate and I are still scrubbing all the data from this school year, and that'll help us predict what McDeeds Creek will look like as we shift students next year as well. So by the end of this year, and if we continue doing things this way, we'll have really good data on what our community looks like in terms of military growth.
That's fascinating.
And Madam Chair, the superintendent does recommend that you consider a motion to endorse April as the month of the military child at your meeting next week.
And is this the first year we've done this?
First time we've done a resolution, I believe.
I think
A lot of other school districts do that surround military installations, so this is, pretty customary, but it's the first time that Moore County schools that we've considered doing it here.
We've certainly been active in celebrating
Yes.
April as a month of the military child. It's the first year that we've asked the board to consider a
Formal.
resolution, right?
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Any other questions, comments?
I was just gonna say, I know different schools, like Bass Lakeview does every Monday for Purple. So I know that we've been doing it in other schools, but this is nice that it's actually gonna be across the county, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With your permission, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm mindful of the fact that we have our budget presentation at the end of the meeting, so board members, staff have been advised. Who's next? Somebody, let's see, Mr. Eklund? Yeah, if you get your, I'm filling space for you here. You don't sit and wait till I'm done. You come up and sit down. But staff has been advised reminded that you all have prepared for the meeting today and to kind of get us to the budget presentation here unless there's specific questions you have. Mr. Eklund, item 3D.
Yes, and I'll try to be brief to respect your time. As you're aware, Pinehurst Elementary will be operating out of a temporary school in the 2019-2020 and 2020-2021 school years. In order to have the school fully operational, there needs to be network infrastructure. We also need to move the classroom display equipment from the existing school to the new school. We submitted an RFI for this relocation and infrastructure work. The lowest cost responder for all this work, including, I'd like to note that we also included security camera installations to cover the outside of the campus to make sure that there's the entrances and the building perimeters are all covered by security cameras. The total cost of this work is $103,093.10 to be paid through the school construction bond. And you have information on the actual work contract and how it breaks up for the different elements, and I'm available for any questions.
This is kind of small beans here, I know, but when they're gonna remove all 38 projectors and projector arm smart boards and whatnot from the one building, from the building that's to be demolished.
Yes,
and put them
yes.
And it costs $250 a piece for them to do that. And yet, it also costs $250 for them to just take a new one out of a box and put it on the wall?
Well, that was just, that we had them price additional costs for in case we were going to replace new ones as well. We just wanted to make sure that there was a line item to cover that in case the equipment that we're removing from the school is not functional and we need to have a new one installed.
Right, I just
So-
thought it interesting that they're gonna charge us the same thing to take one down, transport it, put it back up, that they would have just put one up.
Yeah.
Well, there's more labor in the first one than in the second one.
I think that's more just to have a line item on there. I'm not sure how many, when we actually do the inventory of the equipment that's in the school, we're gonna determine how many there are that actually would be new installed. You see, for instance, the TV mount installation, for instance, we were making sure that there was coverage for that, because in some cases it would be a TV that would get moved in that case.
Some of them are working, some aren't.
Yeah, yes. And what we'll actually be replacing, and to be honest with you, it's only the projector itself that would get replaced. They would still pull the smart board down and take the arm down, so the amount of labor that's involved in the removal is gonna be similar. It's gonna be.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but we're charging $250 to do all of that, to take it
Right.
all down. But we're also being charged $250 just to take a new one out of a box and put it on the wall.
Well, I would assume that if we just provide them with a new projector as part of what they've taken down, there's not gonna be an additional cost for that. I think they were just having coverage for if there's additional, depending on the total room locations. Working with Mr. Barath, we're working out the exact number of classrooms and how that maps to the existing buildings. So there may be the exact mapping of the 38 classrooms.
So there's 38 classrooms that are gonna get used ones.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's labor. And then there's 4 that are gonna get new ones. And that's equipment and labor.
No, that's just
No,
labor as well.
that's just labor.
And I'm just questioning why the labor, it's such a small amount, I don't want to quibble over it, but why the
Well, it's there
labor is
now,
the
and the
same,
staff
yeah.
looks bad, so I'm trying to make sure. Yeah, at this point, the question's out there, and so let's just take our time and be sure. I'm just trying to help Kent, just breathe and.
And John
He
probably would
wasn't
know
ready-
better
he
the
wasn't
answer
ready
to
for
that.
for the question, so let's just let him have time to
Well,
look at it. and-
what would actually happen in what would happen in the case where we wanted to make sure that they had a coverage line item for if we were going to replace the projector as part of the process. So they've written it out as new installation. This is how much the cost would be for new installation for a new projector.
But there's 4 of them.
That's basically a cost allowance for if there are 4 projectors that need to be replaced.
Okay, but has there been some discussion with Ashley Saccone that I would identify, there's 38 and 4?
Right.
I guess what I'm trying to get at, when I read this, it seemed to me as though, I said, oh, in Kent's and John's discussions with Ms. Saccone, there are 38 used smart board project arms that are available, and 38 classrooms that need it. And I just presumed at this point that there were 4 additional that we needed to purchase.
Well, it's an allowance for 4. So if the actual final project, there's not an
The
additional 4.
allowance is based on an assessment.
Yeah.
All right, so how many do we need? It looks to me as though we need 42.
To be honest with you, I have to speak with Mr. Barath about
Okay.
the design, the actual room design of the mobile units as they're being built. There was some adjustment to how the classrooms were laid out between the different buildings.
Okay.
So the total number that we will be finally invoiced will be no more than the $250 per classroom.
I
So
get that, but I know enough about the layout of the school to know that we're in the neighborhood of about 40, 42 classrooms. So those numbers added together make sense to me by some combination, either combined classrooms or total classrooms of 42. And so the only point that I wanted to make, that it would be reasonable that in the case of those 4, there's a purchase price for the equipment of $250 that happens to be similar to the per labor cost of taking them from one building to the other.
No, it's all labor. So the only thing that would be replaced in those cases when we say 4 new projectors, those are owner provided according to the contract. So the projectors would not be provided by NetSource. We would provide the projectors to them as if we were doing a normal classroom refresh.
So Mrs. Carter's critique stands. It's unusual that the cost for disassembling at one site and assembling at another site is the same price as assembling on its own for 4 of those units.
Well,
It's okay to say that she's made a good point.
Yeah, it is a relevant point, but just to clarify without getting too much in the weeds, if you look at one of the installations, the only portion of that would be replaced is the projector that's hanging down. So the work that would be involved for that classroom would be the board and the arm. So there would still be a board and an arm removal, and then there would be an allowance for Moore County Schools to provide a projector to the installers to say, okay, this end-of-life or failed projector will be provided, a new unit or replacement unit would be provided by Moore County Schools. So the labor would be similar in both cases.
So is it 38 minus 4 classrooms?
Okay.
Those 4 are within the 38. It's an additional cost for
Yeah.
those.
Madam Vice Chair, the superintendent's recommendation still stands. The variation in cost would be a total of 4 times, let's say, 125. So we just invested about 10 minutes on what amounts to be
On something, I know,
yeah,
it's a
about
very minor thing.
$500 of that. So my recommendation still stands. We'll get Mr. Eklund and when Mr. Barath gets back in town, we'll get them to offer a explanation to the board at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Dr. Grimsey? Madam Chair, I'm here on John Barath's behalf. Obviously, I'm not John. I can't fit in a vest, so I don't have that going for me, but I'm on his behalf to present to you tonight for your consideration and award a contract for grading and installation of water and sewer services to the temporary Pinehurst site. Mr. Barath opened bids March 28th for the installation of water lines, sanitary sewer lines, stormwater grading, and fire lanes serve the temporary Pinehurst Elementary site. And I bring to you the recommended award winner of that. This is the same firm that also is the same contractor that has been utilized at Medeed's, same contractor that's doing the sewer extension at Aberdeen. This is under budget, and I bring to you a recommendation from Dr. Grimsey to approve this. Certainly, we'll take any questions you might have and follow up with Mr. Barath if needed.
Are there any questions? I was surprised at the big variance, but happy that there was a low bidder as much as it was, or as little as it was.
And that will come with the superintendent's recommendation, Madam Chair. I reviewed that and
Any other
encourage the board's
questions?
consideration.
All right.
Thank you.
Next item.
Item 3F, we have Ms. Murphy.
So, as we just talked at length about this the other day on Friday at the special called meeting, you may recall that at the special called meeting last Friday, the board passed a motion to extend the process for the name evaluations for our new elementary schools in Aberdeen, Southern Pines, and Pinehurst. I did have one of several reasons why we decided, or the board decided to go ahead with that, was because of the variance and comments that we had gotten and the wide variety of community input that we received. So I thought I would cover some of those comments in this presentation that we have today. So as the board knows, we met with community leader groups from Aberdeen, Pinehurst, and Southern Pines from all 3 areas. On March 11th, the Board of Education finalized a list of name options for the Aberdeen and Pinehurst schools and approved the opening of a feedback portal that was open from March 12th to 22nd. So the data that I'm presenting today is feedback only related to those 2 schools, the Aberdeen and Pinehurst schools. The new Aberdeen Elementary School, as we know, will consolidate a 5-2 and 3-5 into one K-5 school. It will exist on a new site location. The name options that were developed by community leaders included consisted of Aberdeen Crossing, Aberdeen Elementary, and Blues Crossing Elementary. There were a total of 277 comments, and the way we opened the portal was that it was not a vote. It wasn't a yes or no vote on each name. I find that when we have comment versus voting, you get a lot more thoughtful comment and input that can be evaluated. So just to kind of briefly summarize, there were a number of comments about having this being a new school located at a new location. Another comment was that it could negatively impact students that are coming from other areas to have it named Aberdeen if they aren't from Aberdeen. One said that all three of the schools, and I had several comments related to this, all three of the schools should be either named after the town that they're located in, or none of the three should be named. And this person was okay with none of the three being named after the town. Changing the school is important to reflect the attendance area. And changing the name could make the school more inclusive. Now, I want to keep in mind, or keep you all in mind, most of the general comments were in favor of keeping Aberdeen Elementary. That was very clear from the data. But I also wanted to give the board an opportunity to see some of the variance in the comments. We did have quite a number of people weigh in with thoughtful comments about why the name shouldn't stay Aberdeen Elementary, but there were a number of supportive messages for Aberdeen. Aberdeen Crossing, some liked it for being dynamic and grounded. Others said if the goal is to rebrand the school, it's still too close in terms of a name. I won't read through every single one of these comments, but just kind of pick out one or two. It doesn't seem to make much sense. That was kind of an interesting comment. And another commenter felt it was a very appropriate name for the Aberdeen area school. So a lot of variance there. For Aberdeen Elementary, there were a lot of supportive comments, but there were some that weighed in that the school name needs to change. Some identified with the roots of the school. Others talked about inclusivity. And just some excited comments in general about being excited about having a new school. So it was kind of nice. And then Blues Crossing, we had a lot of folks weighing in about the Blue family and how they were huge in Moore County. Some pointed out perhaps a more diverse name rather than naming it after a family of white settlers to the area. That was a theme that came up with both schools. Felt like it honored the history of Aberdeen, and there were some other positive comments related to Blues Crossing. For the new Pinehurst Elementary School, a little bit different of a situation. It's replacing an existing school. It's going to be on the same site as the existing school. It's not a consolidation. The community leaders brought forth one name, which was Pinehurst Elementary. And then, as you may recall, at last month's, at the March board work session, you proposed two additional names, one called Old Town Elementary and one called Village Elementary. There were 188 comments related to these three options. Again, it was not a vote. It was a comment-only type of portal. General comments, some people commented about stop affiliating the schools to the town. And then quite a bit of comments of elitism and privilege for the Pinehurst name as a symbol of status and notoriety in the area. Specifically to Old Town Elementary, some people liked it, others didn't like it. But all in all, some pretty limited comments. Pinehurst Elementary was overwhelmingly popular for the name in this particular case. Pinehurst Elementary, we did have a lot of supporters for this name particularly, but we did have some people still weigh in about the redistricting effort if we're bringing in kids from other areas, that it should not be just named after one town. And then Village Elementary, we had some people that liked this one. And they liked the location and the history of the school, and a good nod to using the location without using the name Pinehurst. But the mascot, or so I had a few jokes about the Village people. But all in all, pretty interesting comments, and we appreciate the public's feedback as always, and that's always very helpful to see. So at this time, since we've extended, or the board has extended this effort, we'll just put this comment section on hold for next time. We'll be reopening the process later this year when we've had an opportunity to hold meetings with the community leaders again, and once the redistricting is finished, so we know exactly what areas are included in each school, in each school's attendance area. So, any questions the board may have?
If I might, Madam Chair, offer clarification. Originally, when we were developing this work session agenda a month ago, we were still thinking that the board would take action this month on the names of these schools, and it was listed under pending action and discussion. Over time, for the reasons cited by Ms. Murphy, we concluded, as the board voted on Friday, to extend the process. It now occurs to me that the clerk and I did not pick up on that, and this was left as a pending action item when, in fact, Ms. Murphy's presentation today is reports, information, and discussion. So, board members, when you set up your agenda for next Monday night, do not include item F in your considerations for consent or board action, because it is an information item. And Ms. Potter and I will remedy that for the official record on the agenda and the minutes accordingly. We'll get that taken care of. Very good report by Ms. Murphy, but I regret that I didn't pick up on that when I did my final review of the agenda. Just a point of order there.
Thanks for clarification.
Yes,
I didn't catch it either.
Yeah, you'll notice there's no superintendent's recommendation. And then the title itself says reports, information, and discussion. I just missed it, so we're good.
Well, we threw an extra meeting on you last week, so.
We didn't pick, I didn't make that transition with that Friday meeting, so please accept my regrets. Any questions for Ms. Murphy?
Thank you.
Yeah, since the
very
process is
helpful to see
extended,
that.
we wanted the official record to show that we completed the process of community input and report out on that. And now you can kind of leave that alone for a little while you focus on a few other priorities or as you develop a new timeline there. Madam Chair, with your permission?
Yes, next item.
Item 3G.
Good afternoon. We are seeking school board endorsement to proceed with our 3 spring surveys: School Climate and Culture Survey, the Moore County Schools Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and the North Carolina Digital Teaching and Learning Survey, which is in Steve's ballpark. We placed the surveys on our website to elicit feedback from the community, and we have not received any feedback. And so we are asking your approval to move forward to administer these surveys in April and May.
I think that our community has come to the place of not only approving of our administration of these surveys, but endorsing it. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about our engagement with students in this respect. And so for that reason, this recommendation comes with my recommendation. The board consider a motion to endorse administration of the School Climate Culture Survey, the MC, we got to come up with something here, but the Moore County Schools YRBS survey and the North Carolina Digital, help me, Steve, DTL.
Digital Teaching and Learning.
Teaching and Learning Survey, thank you.
Remind me when we'll see the outcomes of these data, when we'll see the reports?
So for ours, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and the Climate and Culture Survey, we usually get the link with the information, usually the first time we did it, we got a link about 2 weeks after we did it, and we started diving into the data a couple weeks after that. What about yours?
Digital Teaching and Learning, it's a pilot this year, and so they're saying they're going to have it to us by the end of June at the latest.
Okay, so we'll be able to use it for next year's planning. That's where I was going with that.
And the chair's request was, when would the board know when so that would be the school board monthly update?
Yes.
That we could report out on the board with that.
Great. Well, it'd be good for the individual teacher, schools to have their own data, right, for their planning and such. Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Next item.
Who is sitting in for Dr. Powers on
I am
field trips?
doing that one
Okay.
too. I appreciate not having to get up and down as many times as he normally does. I get to do 2 at a time here. This is our out-of-state field trips. Requesting permission. Pinecrest High School has 3. They would like to send their concert and freshman orchestra students to Williamsburg, Virginia for competition. They would like to send their men's and women's track teams to Columbia, South Carolina to participate in the Bojangles Invitational Track Meet. And they would like to send their speech and debate students, those that have qualified for the next level, to Milwaukee for competition. Northmore would like to send their Future Business Leaders of America to San Antonio, Texas. Southern Middle School would like to send their 8th grade orchestra students to Williamsburg, Virginia to participate in Music in the Park competition at Busch Gardens.
I've got 2 questions, and you probably don't know the answers.
I might not know the answer, but I can certainly get you the answer if I don't know.
on the Pinecrest debate trip, not debate trip, track and field trip, they're having to take an activity bus, which I know Columbia is not on an activity bus. It's a lot longer than a couple hours away. I just would like to say I hope they're fresh enough to run when they get there. Because that's a long trip on an activity bus. If you've not been on one in recent years, when they padded all the seats, they did not leave much in the way of leg room on the buses. My question actually is, at the end of it where they have the teachers and adult supervisors listed, are all those folks district employees that are going?
On the end of that report, I'm not sure. I did not actually print out all of the reports to look at, so it may be that there were some, but I can certainly find that out and let you know.
Find out from Mr. Hewitt
And
and report back.
They may possibly be, but that's a lot of. They are all district employees. Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
But no subs are needed for any of them.
I can't answer that, but
Is it just weekend?
So I would say no.
Okay. That's a Friday. Mm-hmm.
That's the start of spring break, too.
Yeah, it is. It's the week before Easter. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We wish them all well.
And those come with my recommendation for approval by the board. And Madam Chair, the next item, 3J, 3I, I will defer to you and the board clerk.
So these were edits that we had talked about on our Code of Cooperation when we met in February. And so these are all the edits that we identified together during that meeting. And so anything in red is where we have either additions or deletions. And I appreciate the clerk in writing clearly what's added and what's deleted. So I'm just asking for any additional feedback, and then we can adopt this next week, or any questions. All good? You were all there. Okay. Did I give you enough time, Dr. Grimacy? So my recommendation for next week would be just to have a motion to approve this updated Code of Cooperation for the board.
With your permission, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
It is my privilege to provide you with the final formal superintendent's recommended budget for fiscal year 2019-20. What makes this presentation very easy, what makes it difficult is that Mike Bundy, I feel out of balance here. I don't know what to do without Mike sitting here. I'll just pretend he's there. But what makes it difficult is Mike is not here. What makes it easy is that there is no change from when we presented this budget to you a month ago. You have had a public hearing in which you received resounding support from the community on the budget as it was presented. There have been opportunities for discussion, and the staff has received no input from the board to make any changes. And so with that, just to, as a courtesy to the public, we'll just sort of walk through the document. And we don't have PowerPoint on this, so we're just going to sort of scroll it, correct? Okay. So The budget is based on your, as presented previously. I had asked you to please evaluate the budget in the context of your vision. Next slide, your mission and your core beliefs. And then Mike and I organized the proposed costs for the coming year based on the domains in the strategic plan, and we demonstrated a process by which we would achieve certain budget goals for the board over a 5-year period of time. And so that was divided up into costs associated with Domain 1, academic achievement, Domain 2, student safety, health, and welfare, Domain 3, employee culture and capacity, Domain 4, parent and community engagement, Domain 5, organizational capacity and efficiency. The total annual and cumulative costs are shown on slide 10, and it reflected, as I stated last month, a lot of intent on the part of the board to address deferred costs and cuts that have been made in previous years. And in that $4,208,100 reflected the board's desire to catch up with costs that have either been cut in the past or deferred over time as the board attempted to reconcile its dependence on its own fund balance. That having been done, and no recommended cuts this year, it was the board's desire, as instructed to Mr. Bundy and I in February, that we bring to you a budget that reflected your desire to address those deferred costs and those previous cuts. It also showed that if there was a robust investment on the part of the county up front, that in real short order, we would be within 3% of a very manageable amount of money as you get 3 to 5 years out in terms of what we've identified as those long-term costs. But remember, $4,208,110, you'll see that up here. Slide 11, estimated state salary and benefits. We don't have any more information now than what we had a month ago. In Raleigh, the estimates are all over the place in terms of what teachers will be paid. It does appear as though it may be 3+ instead of, under 3. There seems to still be a lot of consensus to move on teacher salaries. This slide, of course, reflects what the local cost of that salary increase would be for those locally funded positions for both certified and classified if the state were to move in that direction. Slide 12, this now takes the same array of expenses that was presented previously and breaks them not into domains under the strategic plan, but based on fixed cost items and on other identified needs. And you can see that we identified $1,473,100 in fixed costs. And then the next two slides, 13 and 14, you can see, if we go to slide 14, Catherine, you can see that the total identified costs of other needs beyond fixed costs, this would be those other deferred needs and previous cuts that we had, was $2,735,000. The next slide then arrays those costs together on slide 15. And in this particular visual array, you'll remember that Mike Bundy took the original forecast by the county manager of $850,000, which he shared with the county commissioners back in January. Just as an illustration, he set that as the base and showed what type of remedy that provides with regard to the $1,473,100 in fixed cost increases. It shows that we're still $623,000 short of that, but that's still a process. The county manager is still working on those projections, and in our ongoing conversations with him, he is hopeful that his future projections will be in excess of $850,000. So we're very anxious to see what that'll be in the next couple of months. If you add on top of that the additional $2,735,000 in other projected costs, you can see that we still have quite a gap between what the county manager has projected as new recurring revenues, but it does illustrate the difference between those. Again, Mike presented that last month, just by way of reminder now. The part of the presentation last month that we really wanted you to pay closest attention to was what we called our framework of needs, which begins on slide 16. We tried to work, what were those first costs that we knew were so fixed that they had to be built within that first $850,000. And so this array that shows the addition of 2 teachers just to stay in compliance with the new state law regarding class size reductions would be the first $130,000 that we would need to commit. That should we, as estimated, have an additional 75 charter school students next year added to our current cost. These would be students that were never in our building before. This would be an additional $249,600. We need to set aside money to accommodate the local cost associated with any state salary increases for certified and classified employees, $415,000. And then to stay compliant with our own allocation formula for school receptionists, we'd need another $15,000. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire framework for that, but I want to emphasize that the estimate of $850,000 is pretty much taken care of with these immediate fixed cost increases. If we want to maintain current operations beyond next year, we added the salary step increases for certified staff, implementing the classified salary proposal, and transferring selected personnel from bridge funding to local funds. That among the $1.4 million in fixed cost, $1.3 million of it is on this page right up front, as we emphasized last month. The framework continues on slide 17. Restoring past cuts was the next category. And then we talked about value-added investments. These might be some investments we look at where we might take a risk with surplus fund balance, invest money in these areas, see what type of return on investment we get. If those investments result in a moderation in the increase in parents using those choice options, which results in an increase in our ADM, these positions may end up paying for themselves. And we'd evaluate that on an annual basis and see after a 2 or 3 year period of time if that's the yield that we get. So when you look at this framework, that then goes finally into this, these next 2 pages, excuse me, it was just 2 of 4. Expand to meet deferred needs. Now we go back into the past and say, what are the things that we've been trying to work into the budget these last few years? This is sort of that catch-all of those deferred needs, another $865,000. All of this is totaled then on slide 19. In order to maintain current operations, $809,600. Maintaining current operations beyond next year, $1,357,500. Restoring past cuts, $1,066,000. Value-added investments, $110,000. Hopefully we'd recover that. And expanding to meet deferred needs, $865,000 for a total, and here's that number again, $4,208,100. Just shows reconciliation. Summary of reoccurring costs then. You see at the top, we showed you fixed costs and other identified needs, $4,208,000. Then down here at the bottom, we sort of break that into that visualization that Mike had provided earlier, $4,208,100. Summary of one-time costs. This is a separate category. You'll recall that we need funding for about the last quarter of next year. We need to start assigning staff to the new Aberdeen and Southern Pine schools. That means that we're going to need to be employing people to backfill behind them. Other expenses related to the process of starting up those schools, $234,100 on the back end of next year. Technology lifecycle infrastructure. This was a request that was included in John Barath's presentation to the commissioners in January, $750,000. The projected operational cost for the new McDeeds Creek School, you've seen these numbers a number of times before, $740,000 for utility costs and primarily personnel costs that will then result in a reduction when we consolidate the Southern Pines and Aberdeen schools the next year. So it's really a one-time only investment on the part of the commissioners for revenues. And then this supplemental request for capital improvements to support maintenance and repairs, $1,900,000. Total of $3,624,100 one-time expenses for next year only. Now we get into the slides that summarize our budget. You can see that our request for county funding for 1920 is officially $35,208,100. That represents an increase, and there's that number again, $4,208,100 compared to last year. That would be a substantial increase of 13.57%. Note that the county funding includes $29,500,000 for current expense, $900,000 for digital learning, $750,000 for capital outlay, and $4,058,100 for capital outlay, and let's see, coupled with $4,058,000. I'm stumped. I don't have Mike here to answer where that one comes from. I shouldn't have gotten into the fine print. I do know all the numbers add up. Let's skip it and move on. All right. County allotment for fund type. This one always gets a little dicey. Local expense, charter schools, capital expense, digital learning, $35,208,100 does not include fines and forfeitures. So it's very important that we look at the next slide. When we look at a county appropriation of $32,298,100 plus charter schools, this would be the non-Moore County schools students' expense, $1,260,000, fines and forfeitures, which is actually separate. The county doesn't really give that to us. We get that separate, but then it's cited under local expense in our budget. Mike always, the two Mikes have always identified that separately for a total of $34,038,100. When we look at the total Moore County Schools budget, this is where I get into what really makes most sense for me is these last two slides. We are projecting a state Fund 1 amount of $75,500,000. Local expense, this would be Fund 2, which is the $32,778,100 in Fund 2 plus the charter schools. That's a total of $34,038,100. Projected federal funds of $7,400,000. Capital expense, Fund 4, this is just that capital fund, $750,000. Child Nutrition Fund 5, $5,485,000. Local Operations Fund 8, this is where your your Medicaid, Freudian slip, Medicaid and your military impact aid funding and a variety of other grants that we have, $2,115,000. Proposed total budget, $125,288,100. Now this is the one that I always start with this one and work backwards on, so this is the one I'm most comfortable with. So our request that we take forward to the county manager for his consideration and presentation of his budget to the county commissioners is for local expense of $32,298,100. That would be in reoccurring funds. We add to that $974,100 for next year only, and that does make sense in the fine print at the bottom. That includes the one-time funding projected for operating costs for McDeeds Creek Elementary School of rounded up to $740,000, plus the startup cost for Aberdeen and Southern Pines of $234,100, and the technology lifecycle infrastructure of $750,000 is on the line below that. So that descriptor is for the one-time funding only that you have, and you can see how those true up across from left to right. Charter schools at $1,260,000, capital expense $750,000, digital learning $900,000. As I've explained to the county manager when I met to discuss this with him, that would mean that if we didn't put it in digital learning, it would be up on local expense. Either way, we need the money. So what we've done is we've reduced local expense by $150,000 and increased digital. That digital line, remember, is for purchasing digital equipment. By us shifting that particular money from local expense to digital learning, we avoid paying sales taxes. So that's just a vehicle for how the money is spent. So we know that we've got a certain target for increasing digital learning. This would be $150,000 in that particular direction. Original request then, as stated earlier, $35,208,100 in total reoccurring expense, one-time funding of $1,724,100. We add to that the supplemental request for supplemental capital in accordance with your 20-year plan. That's $1.9 million for a total budget request of $38,832,200. Okay. Next step in the budget process will be your consideration of this budget during your meeting next week, and then we will present your budget. It will then become your budget. We will present that to the county commissioners at their morning meeting on May 7th. County manager will then have a month to consider where that request fits into his budget that he will present during the morning meeting on June 4th. And then the county will conduct its public hearing and quickly thereafter take action on the budget on Monday night, June 18th. Next, slide 28 is simply once again our opportunity to say thank you to members of the Budget Committee this year. Same summary that we gave last month on slide 29. This budget reduces reliance on non-reoccurring revenues. It provides funding to maintain current operations and services. It restores some past cuts from teachers and maintenance. It provides funding to improve retention and recruitment of support services, technology services, and student services. And it provides one-time funding for a variety of operational needs. There is a pause for discussion and questions. Members, I'm not going to go through the addendum with you, but you've got documents there that will be part of your action. Your official budget resolution, which is actually what you vote on, starts out with "be it resolved." It's not up on the screen, but it's attached. And all of the various scales that you approved last year, which are built in as part of the presentation. Should we end up with the salary increases budgeted in here, the adjustments to those scales would be part of your budget approval, including the supplement structures.
What questions or comments do you have, board members?
You can tell the part of the presentation I'm used to Mike giving. A little rusty on that.
I have no questions. You do a good job explaining it. Mike has done a good job helping build it. I think we need to go to the commissioners and ask for it all.
Any other questions? I do have a few comments. You know, I've heard folks say that this is a bit of a big budget, and is it a stretch? And I will say, you bet it is a stretch. In no way, and I will also say in no way do I expect the county commissioners to fund the entirety of it. And that may be something I shouldn't be saying right here in front of you all, and especially with all the effort that has been put into this. But there it is. In my 4 years on the board, we have done nothing but cut or maintain in order to comply with state mandates and changes to funding allotments. We have eliminated teaching assistants. Remember those? We have cut some teaching positions. We have cut successful programs like year-round and Spanish immersion. We have cut textbooks, central services staff, buses, and more. So yes, this budget is a stretch, and it's a stretch in order to make up for some of those past losses. But since relief hasn't come from the state, we have no option but to turn locally for help. We have to make our needs known, and we have to ask, just like what you said, Ms. Carter. The second thing I would say is this budget far-fetched, and is it full of fluff? And I will say no. There is nothing aspirational in this budget. It represents restoring past cuts to staffing, providing equity in salary to our staff, and working towards national averages for health and counseling services for our students. We would have had these basics and not have to ask the county for them if Moore County Schools' allotment from the state was even close to what we had in 2008. In 2008, you may not remember this, but we had 60 additional staff positions in the entire county. 60 more positions were allotted by the state in their funding formula for our students. Interestingly enough, we had 550 less students in 2008. So we had more support and more adults in our buildings than we do now, with even more students. So what did we have to do? We had to go into our fund balance over the past few years, and we had to ask the county for additional funding to make up those losses. So I just want to keep that in everybody's mind. If you go back and look at those numbers in 2008 and how many staff we had, I believe of those 60, 40 of those were in the classrooms or in the schools themselves. So is this budget what our kids need? Absolutely. Hands down, this is what our kids need. We've cut positions, we've cut services, we've used up our fund balance instead of finding consistent dollars for what is right for our students and staff. So I think it is what our kids need. Do I want to be asking for this much? Do any of us want to be asking for this much? No. It is a big ask. But if we do not ask, if we, the school board, don't point out what our kids need, our students need, our teachers need, and what our staff needs, and show where the state funding is leaving us with holes, if we do not ask for what is right for our students, then who will? So I think as a school board, it is our job to lay out what the needs are for our students and for our staff and ask. I do have hope. The initial estimate from the county manager was back in January. And that was based on information that he had about county revenue at that time. And that was 3 months ago. I'm hoping as the year progresses that that number has become refined. Hopefully it'll be a little bit higher or a lot higher. That could help us with this request. Right now, our current difference between the 4.2 million that you have identified, Dr. Grimacy, and the 850 that he has identified in our current expense is $3,350,000. So I'm hoping that that would be a lot less. I'm also hoping that we have an opportunity to talk about how a lot of our reaching into our fund balance and reaching and having to use local funds has been also because of the rapid rise in charter schools, which I think is important for us to recognize that these are options for our community to use, which is great. But we've had to then reach into our fund balance to be able to support some of the rapid rise in those costs. So I'm hoping that we could come to some type of agreement. So I do have hope, but I do think we have to ask, and that's just what I wanted to say about this budget, because it is big. It is really big, but I don't see anything in here that isn't what our students and our staff deserve. So thank you for putting it together, and we'll do the best we can. All right, next on our agenda, I believe this is where we look at the board meeting agenda for next week. We have already identified that we are removing F from the consideration from any action. Are there any others that we'd want to pull out for board action of this list? Do we want to pull out the budget for board action?
Budget.
That has been your tradition in the past, Madam Chair.
I think so.
Anything else? Everything else consent?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you have that? Sonia, you good?
Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the board.
All right, board comments. Any additional comments? It's been a long meeting, but very informative.
Good meeting.
Mr. Cunningham, any final comments?
It has been long and good, and I think that we turned a corner on the districting, because now people can react to what plans are, not respond to speculation and fear, and we're going to be putting proposals out there that people can give us input on. Forward to continue the process.
Yesterday, I had the privilege of attending the 50th anniversary of the North Carolina Reading Association. and their awards banquet. And I want to congratulate Moore County Reading Association, who was honored after 30 years of being consistent in being awarded an honor council, which is one of the highest achievements in a local council can achieve by the state level. And also to Christine Leo, who's the vice president of Moore County Reading Association, for receiving the President's Award this year. So congratulations.
The only thing I have is I'm looking forward to tomorrow and Wednesday, just to see what parents have to say about the plan of redistricting.
No comments.
The only comment I have is to thank the staff. I know it's been a lot of work these past few weeks and months, and so I just want to thank you for all of the efforts that you've put into all the issues that are before us. They're important issues, and we'll just deal with them one at a time, or all at once, whichever you like. But I just want to thank you all for all your hard work. I know it's just a lot right now, and I'm proud of all of you. I really am. Thank you all. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Did I have to send you all the information?